Welcome. My name is Jason Gonzalez. I'm the program chair of today's event. I'm a proud member of the Rotary Club of Wall Street located in New York City, where Rotary District 7230 is home of the United Nations headquarters. Rotary is a global network of 1.2 million neighbors, friends, leaders, and like-minded problem solvers who aim to create positive and lasting change in our communities and in ourselves. Today, we're celebrating a 75-year history with the United Nations, and the program is designed to focus on thought leadership, prompting action in support of the Sustainable Development Goals and our shared values with the United Nations. We wouldn't have had this opportunity today without the partnership of the Rotary Representative Network and multiple Rotary districts worldwide who also host United Nations operations and programs. Today, I'm also joined by my planning committee members, one of which is Wayne Charles, program co-chair for today's event.
Right now, throughout the world, Rotary, its members and partners are taking action in implementing community-based solutions that empower communities, leverage their talents, and connect them to opportunities. You will soon hear inspiring, heart-touching, firsthand experiences of Rotary members, United Nations officials, and individuals creating community-based solutions addressing the Sustainable Development Goals known as the Global Goals. I ask that you not only listen, but that you join the conversation. To the right, you will find a chat box to communicate with fellow attendees. You will also find on the event website a gallery of service projects for you to get involved locally and globally. I am honored to introduce to you our Rotary Welcome from Mary Eileen Shackleton, current District Governor of Rotary District 7230 and convener of today's multi-district conference. 75 years of action.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Wayne. This event would not be possible without your hard work, initiative, and imagination. This puzzle inspired our event today. Holger Knack, current RI president, gave this puzzle as a memento to every attendee at the International Assembly. It puts into puzzle form his presidential theme, Rotary Opens Opportunities. 1 year ago, New York City and its environs were the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States. Like many others living in this area, I was struggling to find a way through and struggling to find a way to make our district's conference memorable. I took a look at this puzzle and realized that we were going to have to put these puzzle pieces together ourselves and build our own doorway to opportunity. What you're seeing today is a result of those doorways being opened. I hope you enjoy and learn a lot from the fascinating panels of speakers that we have today. So sit back, learn a lot, and enjoy some Rotary Fellowship virtually. I hope to meet all of you in person very soon. Thank you and welcome again. Our next video, A Shared Vision, explains why we're here today in just a few minutes. It details Rotary International's long history with the United Nations from the very beginning. Enjoy.
(1944). Around the globe, nations stared in horror at the devastation of a Second World War. But even as the battles raged, global leaders planned for a new era and a post-war organization for peace. Rotary International, long committed to global cooperation and peace, had been raising awareness of a United Nations, publishing articles and pamphlets to encourage the discussion. Finally, in June of 1945, the eyes of the world were on San Francisco as delegates from 50 countries gathered to sign the UN Charter.
The Conference of the United Nations on International Organization is now convened.
Even as they gathered, delegates read the headlines proclaiming the end of the war in Europe. At the invitation of the U.S. Secretary of State, Rotary International sent 11 Rotarians to serve as consultants to the delegation from the United States. These included 2 past Rotary presidents, Alan Albert and Tom Davis. In fact, there were Rotarians and honorary members from around the globe, some as official delegates for their nations and others as consultants. Ezequiel Padilla served as chair of the delegation from Mexico. Rotarian Carlos Romulo represented the Philippines and would later serve as president of the 4th session of the UN General Assembly.
The Charter of the United Nations is a solid structure upon which we can build for a better world. History will honor you forever.
There was a triumphant ceremony as representatives signed the charter for their nations. Joseph Salem from Lebanon was just one of the Rotarians who signed the charter on behalf of their countries. U.S. Secretary of State E.R. Stettinius was a signatory for the United States. He later described the invitation to Rotary International as a recognition of the practical part Rotary's members have played and will continue to play in the development of understanding among nations. Rotary's participation in the UN Charter Conference was just the beginning of a humanitarian-focused collaboration that continues. Today, with a vision they have shared since the beginning, the United Nations and Rotary serve as examples of global cooperation as they lead efforts to promote peace, development, and world health.
Please welcome our keynote speaker, Stefan Dujarric, Chief Spokesman for the United Nations Secretary General. His biography is available on the event website. Welcome, Stefan.
Thank you so much for having me. I do want to recognize Rotary International President Holger Knack, former President Mark Maloney, and District Governor Mary Shackleton. And I, of course, want to recognize my former colleague, Mahbub Ahmad, who played a critical role in bringing the United Nations into the digital age. Dear friends, it's always a pleasure and frankly a bit humbling to speak to Rotarians, especially when so many of you are also colleagues or former colleagues. Rotary and the United Nations share many of the same ideals. We too at the United Nations dream big and set bold goals. So many of my colleagues in this organization, from those who are on the front lines in refugee camps, to peacekeepers, to those helping ensure that girls have access to education, are dedicated to placing service above self. These shared ideals are no surprise given that Rotarians were active participants in the drafting of the United Nations Charter in San Francisco in 1945. But you are all well aware of your past. I don't have to remind you of the great partnership between the United Nations and Rotary and what it has produced. From creating public information campaigns to promote the United Nations even before it officially existed, to the amazing victory over polio. You know your past, but now is the time to focus on the future and how we will work together to build back better. We are hopefully beginning to see the end of the pandemic. In the Secretary General's own words, 2020 was an annus horribilis. The virus lifted the veil on the inequalities we all knew were there, but may not have been visible to all to see. The COVID-19 pandemic unleashed havoc in every country, in every economy. We lost 2 million lives. Every one of us was impacted one way or another, directly or indirectly. Extreme poverty was back up to levels not seen in a generation. 500 million jobs gone. The economic costs continue to mount. Too many countries have used COVID as a pretext to crack down on human rights. And the most vulnerable, as always, were hit the hardest. Women were the first to lose their jobs and likely the last to regain them. We've seen a rise in gender-based violence. Hundreds of millions of children have lost school time that only the most fortunate will be able to make up. We've seen an explosion in hate speech and hate crimes, and in many parts of the world, a rebirth of Nazi ideology. Sadly, it would take me hours to list all of the areas where we have lost ground in 2020. So this year, 2021, must be the year of getting us back on track, the year of building back. But not building back to what we had with the inequities we knew existed. We need to build back better, build back fairer, build back greener. This year, the Sustainable Development Goals will be more critical than ever. And this is where Rotarians come in, again. Over the years, I've had the privilege of participating in meetings of Rotary International, whether at the United Nations or even at the Global Rotary International Convention in Seoul in 2016. But what I have valued the most are the conversations I've had with individual Rotarians, whether casual chats with seatmates during my travels or speaking at small Rotary meetings. A few years back, I was invited to address Rotarians in various towns in Washington State and Oregon. What I've learned is that Rotarians are on the front lines. The efforts you make at the local level are critical to the work we do at the global level. You are that critical link that brings us closer to the first words of the Charter of the United Nations, we the peoples. You raise awareness in your communities. As business people, you ensure that you give back to improve the lives of others. As experts, you make sure that your skills are used for the benefit of those around you and in the wider world. As retirees, you make sure that your years of experience are put to use as you travel the world to help others. The global network of Rotary International is second to none. The support you bring to our work by doing everything you can to ensure that the Sustainable Development Goals are implemented in your communities, wherever those communities may be, will be critical to our success in building back better in the years ahead. Dear Rotarians, you will need to raise your voice to ensure that everyone, everywhere, has access to the vaccine. Making sure that vaccines are treated as a global public good is a moral test for us all, and a test we risk failing. Given your experience fighting polio, no one understands better the concept of none of us being safe until all of us are safe. I call on you to sign up to the United Nations verified and Only Together campaigns that focus on fighting disinformation and fighting for vaccine equity. You will also need to keep your political leaders accountable so that stimulus funds address inequalities and that we have green investments. What we have seen to date is an underinvestment in green technology and climate-resilient projects. We need to ensure that these stimulus packages are used to move away from a carbon-based economy. I call on you to build net zero coalitions in your own communities. Lastly, and in my view, maybe the most crucial, I call on you to fully embrace the essential role you have in helping to restore civility in public life and discourse. We need your help to restore trust, mutual respect, and dignity. Sadly, simple, basic human decency is fraying around us all around the world. Since 1905, as Rotarians, you know these are not just some feel-good notions. They are essential underpinning of our common human bonds and are indispensable to forging and fueling solutions that will lift us all. If we are to succeed in building a fairer, more equitable world, we will need Rotarians to continue what they have always been doing, getting involved and getting results. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Stefan. Stefan Dujarric, spokesman for the United Nations Secretary General. I've had the great fortune of being at the UN, attending the World Youth Assembly as part of the celebrations for the UN's 25th anniversary in 1970. Yes, I was a bit younger then. Fast forward to 1995 for the 50th anniversary, and I was right there working at the UN as part of the team launching the UN website. Fast forward again to today, and here I am celebrating the UN's 75th anniversary with two distinguished senior UN officials. With us now is UN Undersecretary General for Global Communications, Melissa Fleming. Undersecretary General, you've been at the head of the communications teams at the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, and the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR. You've also been featured at TED Talks, and you have a book, A Hope More Powerful Than the Sea. Welcome to Rotary.
Great to be with you, Mahbub. Thank you very much for having me.
Madam Undersecretary General, recently, under your leadership, the UN launched 2 new campaigns, Share Verified and Only Together. Could you share with us highlights of these 2 campaigns?
Yeah, maybe just a second on the backdrop, because we launched these 2 campaigns when COVID-19 became a pandemic. What was clear that what we were facing, not just a global public health crisis, but we were facing a communications crisis as well. What we needed in order to contain and control this pandemic was global trust more than ever before. But we are in a landscape that is polluted, a media landscape that is polluted with misinformation. It was clear to us that we needed to get out into that space with good information, trusted information, based on science. So we created this initiative called Verified, and this initiative was to flood the internet with science-based communication, but attractive and engaging pieces of content that is optimized for social media and traveling also in those spaces where people are being, faced with misinformation that is distorting the truth. So that's the one thing. So we launched this Verified campaign to really penetrate the internet with how to protect yourself and your communities against the pandemic, and most recently also the benefits of the COVID-19 vaccine. And that comes to now our other campaign, which is called Only Together. This was launched because actually the Secretary General predicted this, and so did Dr. Tedros from WHO, that we were going to be quickly facing a situation where the rich nations of the world were vaccinating their citizens like crazy, and the poor nations couldn't see a vaccine in sight or in their near future. This played out, unfortunately, even though there is a fantastic facility that was established, a first of its kind in history, called the COVAX facility, that is there to supply poor and low-income countries with the vaccines, but it's underfunded and undersupplied. So Only Together is basically a public campaign to really raise awareness about the need to vaccinate everyone, everywhere, because only together can we come out of this crisis. The vaccine knows the virus knows no borders, and the vaccine can help us see a future where we can all, move on and do the things that we love.
What would the UN like to achieve via these 2 campaigns?
Well, with the first one, Verified, we had 2 strands. One was to provide really solid, good public, information for the public, so that they know, okay, the United Nations is behind this. It's WHO information, it's UNICEF information, it's UN information. We can trust this. It's understandable. It's engaging. I got it. Okay. This is what we want people. We want to establish the UN as that place for trusted information where people can turn to in the languages they speak, and through the influencers who, kind of speak to them. So that's one strand. The other is that we're fighting misinformation. So we're doing it in 2 ways. One, we're teaching people about how misinformation travels. So we've recruited thousands and thousands of what we call information volunteers around the world. They're kind of digital first responders who take our content and share it in their social media feeds. They also are educating themselves through our information on what is misinformation, how it travels, how to spot it, and how to stop the spread. We've also been creating this social norm out there that we hope is ringing in people's ears when they see information online that makes their heart palpitate and make them feel like, oh, I found a miracle cure, or I don't know if this is true. Let me share it with. And that seems to be the instinct. And so the campaign, that the norm is pause, take care before you share. We've been spreading, we've reached 1 billion people with this pause message in languages and countries all over the world. And we do have evidence that it has influenced behavior and that people are thinking twice before they share. We're also working with the social media platforms, and we've seen significant policy changes. We've seen significant moves to remove misinformation, and most recently to remove content that is leading people to fear the vaccine when actually they should be seeing it as their way out to protect themselves and their communities.
Great. How can Rotary and its worldwide network of Rotarians help with these campaigns?
Well, we would love every Rotarian to consider joining us on shareverified.com. There you can sign up to become an information volunteer, and you'll receive an email from us every day, 5 days a week, and a really engaging email, I think an informative one, and with some content that you know maybe you could share in your own feeds or just talk about with your friends and colleagues. That's one way. Also, I think that it just really understanding, in particular, this message of we're only safe when everyone is safe around the vaccine. I think it's really important to talk about in our communities the importance of vaccine equity. All of us should go and get our vaccines if we have the opportunity, but we should also be thinking about people like us in other parts of the world who don't, and advocating for sharing, for our governments to share doses, to donate to the COVAX facility, and really to think about getting the entire world vaccinated so that we can really have a chance to overcome this pandemic.
Mm-hmm. The UN and Rotary have so much in common. What do you see as the possible areas where our two organizations can work together for the common good?
Well, I think, all of us believe you're a global organization, we're a global organization. I think Rotarians understand that we need to work together all over the world to solve global problems, that problems, we have problems that exist in communities, but many of them are quite universal, and that it's really, we're just a better world with global cooperation. So I think just continuing to perpetuate this international collaboration, I think is so important. And really, I think our values are very similar. Mm-hmm. And we need more than ever, people who just believe in making this world a better place, a more inclusive world, a more equal world, and a more just world.
You've been in the information field for most of your professional career. Do you think the UN has been effective in telling its story?
That's a really good question. Not always, unfortunately. I think the UN story is absolutely compelling. And when people really learn about it, they say, wow. But there's a long way to go for us to really tell the UN story, and it's complex. The UN is made up of so many different, 8 different agencies. We also have the peace and security side, which is here in New York at the Security Council, and this is often equated with inaction, or member states not being able to solve the world's problems, and wars keeping going on. So I think that's one story, but then we need to focus on, and this is what we're trying to do, this is the new communication strategy that I've introduced at the UN. Let's talk about the problems that are facing the world. Let's present the world and our publics with what's wrong with the world. But the UN needs to be about prescribing how we can fix it, and demonstrating where we already are making that difference. And we are, I think, very often. I came from working for 2 UN agencies that were, IAEA really working for preventing nuclear calamity. Sometimes that's a story that's really hard to tell when you're preventing things through your inspections and nuclear security and nuclear safety. And then working for the UN Refugee Agency. I mean, that was a very challenging story to show how an agency like that is providing protection to millions and millions of people around the world. They just became statistics. So my philosophy is, there's a saying, statistics are human beings with the tears dried off. Mm-hmm. There's a reason for that, because when you present people with too many statistics, with mass suffering, the human behavioral natural reaction is to feel numb and just to feel like, oh I hope somebody is dealing with that problem. That's awful. Mm-hmm. So the way to really build that bridge of empathy to people is through storytelling. And that's what I've been trying to introduce. We have to provide the facts. We have to provide the data and the science, but we also have to build a bridge to people's hearts.
Very good. Thank you. A few quick questions. When you think of Rotary, what comes to mind?
I think what comes to mind is people who want to give back, people who care about the world and their communities, and want to actually take some action and to be involved.
What has been your most memorable UN moment?
I think the moment when I met Doa al-Zamal, the young Syrian refugee woman who was the subject of my book, A Hope More Powerful Than the Sea. And she told me and trusted me with her story of how she survived the worst shipwreck, one of the worst, I think it may be one of the worst on the Mediterranean Sea, where 500 of her fellow passengers drowned, including the love of her life, her fiancé. And when she was rescued after 4 days and 4 nights on the water, she had 2 little children on her chest. One was a baby, 18 months old, and they were not her own. She managed to save one of them. And for me, her story told the struggle of everything the UN was trying to work for, to stop the war that drove so many refugees from her home, to protect the refugees like Doa who were in neighboring countries, but who found still the need to take a risk on those boats across the Mediterranean Sea because they wanted a future. So the UN is also about that, fighting for the future, trying to provide protection, but also give people the hope and the chance to thrive. And so, that was the story that I wanted to tell the world, because it's a story of human suffering, but also resilience. And I believe the UN is about alleviating human suffering and trying to give people the chance to live in dignity and live in peace.
A very moving story. Finally, what's your favorite UN hashtag?
Right now it is #OnlyTogether. And I think it really says a lot. It says, it's right now being applied to vaccine equity, and only together can we get back to the things that we love if everybody can get a vaccine. But I think it can be applied to almost everything. Only together can we overcome the ravages of climate change through collective climate action. Another example. And only together can we help solve the wars that have been driving so many people from their homes and causing so much misery. So you could really apply it to multilateralism and also perhaps to the way Rotary works and its mission.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What would your message to our Rotarians out there be?
That everybody can do something to affect change. And sometimes it feels like it's quite overwhelming when you look at all of the problems of the world. And especially now we've been faced with a pandemic that has hit all of us in so many ways. and it's impacted people not just in their health and in the health of the people they love, but it's impacted communities, economies, people's livelihoods, and people's mental health. So I think anything that anyone can do to help other people right now is going to have a ripple effect around the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Undersecretary General Melissa Fleming, Head of UN Global Communications. She's also the host of the award-winning podcast, Awake at Night. Listen to her podcasts wherever you get your podcasts or via the UN website at the address you see on the screen. And now for an official thank you, Madam Undersecretary General, here is Rotary District 7230 District Governor Mary Shackleton.
Madam Undersecretary General, thank you so much for making time to be with us today. We enjoyed your responses to Mabib's questions. Thank you, thank you. Audience, please check out shareverified.com and the hashtag #OnlyTogether. IPDG Mabib, thank you so much for continuing to connect Rotary with the world. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning and good afternoon, Rotarians. Greetings from Nairobi. Rotary and the United Nations have a shared 75-year history of working towards peace and addressing humanitarian issues around the world. And chief among them is the eradication of polio. Rotary brings together more than 1 million people across the globe. They champion action to create lasting change across the world, in our communities and in themselves. Rotarians take action locally and globally. Each day, they pour their passion, integrity, and intelligence into completing projects that have a lasting impact. They persevere until they deliver real, lasting solutions. No challenge is too big for Rotarians. For more than 110 years, Rotarians have bridged cultures and connected continents to champion peace, fight illiteracy and poverty, promote clean water and sanitation, and fight disease. This is certainly in line with the United Nations agenda. At the founding of the United Nations in San Francisco in April 1945, 27 Rotarians served as delegates or technical advisors when the United Nations Charter was adopted. So Rotary was there with the United Nations at its birth, a partnership that has endured 75 years of our existence. Today, Rotary holds the highest consultative status offered to a non-governmental organization by the United Nations Economic and Social Council and is formally associated with the Department of Global Communication as a civil society organization. It is therefore fitting for the United Nations to join Rotarians all over the world in celebrating 75 years of action and solidarity with the principles of the United Nations. I want to wish every one of you and collectively together happy celebrations and continued action that brings change to people's life. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
For over 75 years, Rotary and the United Nations have worked toward peace and addressing humanitarian issues around the world. The Rotary Representative Network is a group of 31 Rotary members who are appointed annually by the Rotary International President specifically to maintain and further Rotary's relationship with several UN agencies, programs, commissions, and bodies, as well as other key international organizations in 14 cities worldwide. I'm honored to be serving my 5th year as an appointed Rotary Youth Representative to the United Nations in New York City, and I have the duty and privilege to amplify Rotary's youth voices and engage young people in UN initiatives. I also play a role in assisting the coordination of Rotary Representative Network's annual and quarterly newsletter, which offers insight into the work that we do every day. You can subscribe via the event website if you're interested. Rotary International President Holger Knack has called on us Rotary representatives to build upon Rotary's deep and lasting relationship with the United Nations. And our goal as a network is to open opportunities across the world for talented, thoughtful, and generous people to unite and take meaningful action through Rotary service. But who exactly is tasked with opening these opportunities, and what do these opportunities look like? I'm joined today by a few of my fellow Rotary representatives to learn their firsthand experiences and to share with you how we create opportunities for the Rotary world and for the public to both learn about and engage with the United Nations. Hello, Sally.
Hello, Jason. Nice to see you.
You too. It has been quite some time, even though we're living in the digital age. And how are you doing in Nairobi, Kenya? You're our representative to UNESCO in Nairobi, that's right?
Yes, from last year, I'm with Rotary, the Rotary representative to UNESCO office in Nairobi. And what a time to be in UNESCO, because with the pandemic, the whole issues of education, the girl child, and culture all come up.
Nairobi is an interesting place because it's such a hub for humanitarian assistance and international development. Can you share maybe what has been your most memorable local example of how Rotarians locally have been supporting the United Nations?
Wow, yes, being a hub in Africa, because we have the United Nations office in Nairobi, we have the United Nations Environment Program, UNICEF, there are some aspects of a World Food Program. So we find that there's a lot of engagement. And if I can just borrow, I'll use a current example and then I'll go back to 2018. So currently what we found is I was pleasantly surprised that, I thought HeForShe was Rotary. And as I engaged with these UN communities, definitely in UNESCO, HeForShe is a currency, and in UNICEF, it's a currency. So last year, when we got into this pandemic, and we were putting up all these projects of hand wash stations and promoting the whole aspect of the 3 aspects, social distancing, washing hands, and wearing of the masks, we were able to partner with so many of these agencies. Definitely UNICEF came up, and we were able to get support from the agencies, go to the schools, and since we were using a common language of WASH, that enabled this to go ahead. So we find that there is, the partners share a common agenda, and so you don't have to introduce. We didn't have to introduce anything. We pick up WASH and we run with it. And when I was presenting my credentials to UNESCO last year, 2020, when we talked about WASH in the aspect of the girl child and education and culture, again, no introduction needed. We know what it is and we move. Now, going back to 2018, my experience is like you, Jason. I was privileged to host Rotary UN Day in Nairobi, and that's when I really appreciated what these global organizations do, because we had the whole Rotary family, international and local, and then once we went into the UN, especially the UN office in Nairobi, the current president of Ethiopia was the then Director General at UN, and she was a former Rotarian and a diplomat. So she opened the doors. So talk of Rotary, you meet people, they open the doors. So she welcomed us, introduced us to her team, and we were home. So the event was so successful. All the agencies were so cooperative. And I think that's what Rotary is all about, that with the UN, because we have a history, as we always say, Rotary is very instrumental in setting up the UN. So once we were there, we were home, and the resources, the people, everybody was willing to participate. So a great experience. The network, we meet many people from different countries. And like you, we're just talking, we meet maybe every 2 years, but where would I have met Jason? So Rotary does open so many doors. Thank you.
Really great examples, and I really appreciate you sharing your insights as a fellow Rotary UN Day coordinator and your experience locally in Nairobi. So thanks again for taking the time to chat.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Cyril Noirtin. I'm a Rotarian in Paris, and I'm currently the Rotary primary representative to UNESCO and the OECD, based in Paris, France.
I'm sure there's lots of Rotary moments or special memories you have as in your role. Can you share with us just one Rotary moment?
During one of the conference, one of the first we did organize, we focus on the team water. And this conference at the end led to a strategic partnership between the foundation and UNESCO. And we have been able to finance some grants to help some students to learn how to manage water. And so that was a great moment, because from a conference, we came out with a concrete project, and it has been running for almost 5 years. And we have trained many water specialists for developing countries, thanks to this project and thanks to the outcome of the conference.
That's really interesting and a really cool example of how our relationship with UNESCO overlaps multiple areas of focus, multiple Rotary's areas of focus, and also multiple SDGs. So thank you for sharing that, Cyril. I think that was pretty informative and helpful for me. So I thank you for taking the time to share some of your perspectives. Hello, Samson. Nice to see you.
Hi, Jason. Nice to see you too.
And you're joining us from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, right? In Rotary District 9212, in fact.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. Can you share one memorable example of your most memorable example with the UN?
I think it was when we were invited by the United Nations as Rotary to attend the UN Career Day. You know, like where they invited fresh graduates from different universities, and were giving them an opportunity to understand what Rotary, the UN is. And Rotary was one of the professional organizations that was invited. We got a lot of members who joined Rotaract afterwards, you know, because they were really eager to volunteer and to participate. And it gave us an opportunity, because there were like more than 500 people who were attending that conference, and most came to our booth and tried to understand what Rotary does. I think those kind of exposures is what really Rotary needs, and also that opens doors for partnership with other organizations too.
Well, Rotaract certainly offers lots of professional development opportunities, and it's clear that there's so many synergies between UN colleagues and the Rotary professionals and community leaders. So, thank you for taking that time to share our work with Rotaractors and young people and potential Rotaractors at the UN in Ethiopia. Yes. And thanks for taking the time to share this today.
Thank you so much. And as you know, like the youth is our future in Africa. So we really need to invest on the youth in Africa. So.
Yes, very good point. I agree.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
So now we'll hear from Alberto Cecchini, who's a Rotary's representative to the International Fund for Agricultural Development, the World Food Program, and the Food and Agriculture Organization, being a primary representative to 3 different organizations. How do you go about supporting the big goal of zero hunger with some of your local connections in the Rotary community?
Thank you for this question, because of course we have in Rome 3 headquarters, 3 UN agencies. All of them are focused on different aspects of food security. So it's quite challenging because we have different approaches with the different organizations, but with the same general goal. Inside FAO, we have a sort of, let's say, network of all the NGOs that have representatives, like not only Rotary, but Alliance, Soroptimist, International Women Alliance, and we meet regularly once a month in order to have a common approach and to have a more consistent action as a civil society. We have two action groups that are focused on similar goals, that are the Rotarian Action Group for the alleviation of hunger and malnutrition, and Food Plant Solution Rotarian Action Group. So this is a quite new approach that we are trying to develop in order to establish a wider network, not just club and districts, but try to identify inside the organization all that groups and members that in some way are experts or are passionate to these topics, in order to involve them in this kind of relationship with the agencies, in order to be more effective, but also facilitating a relationship between Rotary and the UN agencies.
Well, thank you, Alberto, for that overview of how local Rotarians are really helping to achieve zero hunger. Welcome, Guido. I believe you're also joining us from Rome, Italy. Is that right?
That's right. I am alternate representative with FAO, WFP, and IFAD, the three agencies that take care of hunger. And working against hunger for me is a dream. It is an objective of Rotary, a scope of Rotary, but it is also a dream for the world.
How has your experience or your relationship with the world, these organizations, changed over the past year, and how do you keep that commitment to service still going?
Well, it is very difficult to cooperate with directly hands-on with the agencies. We in the last years we only had two projects. The one was with FAO for the Sahrawi people that, as you may know, have been chased from their country and now are in a huge camp in Algeria. We have been waiting for the permission from the Algeria where the camp was, and it never arrived. That was really a sour deception, because Sahrawi people showed the resilience and patience in a situation where there is no issue. They will not go back to their country.
Well, I think that kind of illuminates a really interesting point, which is when I think of the FAO, the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, I think of food clearly and hunger, and I don't think about necessarily disease. But that's really interesting that even though our joint efforts might focus on one ultimate goal, there's plenty of other areas of focus that we also touch on through our service and our commitment to our shared values. So thank you for sharing that sort of perspective and this really interesting story about your collaboration. I hope that it inspires other people to also reach out to the rest of the Rotary network and pursue partnerships in support of the UN's and Rotary's goals. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
Now we'll hear from Josephine, who's really putting into action the opportunity to partner with local UN agencies through her Rotary District 9212 in Nairobi, Kenya, as a Rotary representative to UNICEF Kenya, as well as the United Nations Office in Nairobi. Josephine, hear from you now.
Hi there. My name is Josephine Ojambo. I'm Rotary International's representative to UNICEF and to the United Nations in Nairobi. A question was asked of me about what personally motivates me to represent Rotary at UNICEF and the UN office in Nairobi. Being back home now in Nairobi, Kenya, and with these UN experiences, by using my skills at the UN office in Nairobi as a Rotarian, I fulfill the call to serve. As a Rotarian, the vision of working together with the UN family to achieve sustainable peace by leaving no one behind, even the vulnerable, really motivates me. The fact that the vulnerable don't just want services, they want to be change agents, gives me the urge to do more. Not just more, but more quality. Now, through a memorandum of understanding signed between Rotary and UNICEF in Kenya to ensure the safe return to schools for Kenyan children, the two organizations are safeguarding the right to education and protection for children in the face of the dynamic COVID-19 pandemic. In the short term, our project provides personal protective equipment, hand washing stations and soap and masks. In the longer term, ablution blocks with facilities that are gender sensitive and disability friendly, with the Spot It, Stop It campaign to end violence against children, and the Loving Classroom project to build positive relationships amongst children, their teachers, and families.
Thank you, Josephine. I think that that is a great example of how Rotary really brings together leaders from all levels of the community and really to address some of the core shared values of UNICEF and of Rotary and the United Nations overall and many of the SDGs. So thank you for really being a champion for children and for taking a leadership role on this initiative with Rotary District 9212. I think we have actually a video that will share some more information about this initiative and how our audience can really get involved. So we'll take a look now.
School closures interrupted education for over 17 million children who missed formal education for over 6 months. We know that the longer the children are out of school, the greater the risk that some of them, especially the poorest ones, may never return.
Schools are a vital safety net for the most vulnerable children, including children with disabilities, protecting them from these risks. But in order for children to return to school safely during this ongoing dynamic COVID-19 pandemic, we need to assist and ensure that they have masks, hand washing stations, toilet blocks, behavior change communication, and that teachers and classrooms are prepared, as well as their families.
That is why Rotary and UNICEF Kenya have partnered to support the return of children to schools by supplying hand washing stations to more than 400 of the most vulnerable schools.
UNICEF is supporting Ministry of Education's efforts for back to school. We realize that it is very important for children to go back to school, and if they don't go now, they may never go back, particularly the most vulnerable children. In order to support the infection prevention in schools, UNICEF is procuring large amount of hand washing places and soap for the schools, for all the counties in Kenya. For example, we have installed hand washing stations and distributed soap to reach 300,000 children in over 600 schools. We've also procured 700,000 reusable masks for primary school children across the country.
To this end, we need help from Rotarians across the country.
Let's all come together to support our children at this critical moment. Come, twende shule pamoja. Thank you for watching this video on the safe return to schools. If you'd like to learn more about it, please visit the service gallery to get more engaged.
Hello, Wayne. So it's been, I'm not gonna say it's been quite some time since I've seen you, because we're working together day in and day out to promote the goals of Rotary and the representative network. So it's good to see you on camera, all dressed up. You're our Rotary representative to the United Nations in New York, and so we're both on the New York team. Can you share a little bit about what your role looks like as a Rotary representative?
Yes, Jason, and it's a pleasure to see you looking very spiffy and very dapper yourself. It's been a pleasure to be co-chair with you for this wonderful event we have today. And as you stated, I am a representative here in New York, which is also my hometown, but I'm assigned to the UNDGC, which is the Department of Global Communications. And one of the great things about my position as a Rotary rep in New York is that I kind of mingle and interact with some of the various UN agencies here in the New York headquarters. But the beauty of Rotary is that the foundation lies in our clubs and our districts. So by bringing awareness to, once again, my district is the home, so to speak, district of the UN headquarters in New York, by bringing together seamlessly the Rotarians, who are people of action, and to introduce them to various UN agencies by way of conferences, by way of today's event, I've been able to bring more awareness to what we do as Rotarians and also how we can assist other agencies within the UN.
Is there one particular example that really resonates with you of how the Rotary community, maybe this year or maybe in past years, has supported some of the sustainable development goals or other goals of the United Nations?
Yes, this year, as we all know, has been an unprecedented year based on the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have shown a extreme resilience, and our drive has been very present this year. Granted, many things have occurred virtually. However, we have been able to, that's something I recall specifically, is how our district engaged with UNICEF on World Polio Day back in October of 2020, if I'm not mistaken. And by engaging in that, we are able to fulfill the areas of focus of Rotary as well as the SDGs of the UN. They tie in pretty well. So we've been able to engage our Rotarians in our district to fulfill those SDGs. And one way was, once again, by the awareness of World Polio Day and the overall eradication of the polio virus.
I think that that's a great example of how the Rotary community and UN community come together. And I'm so appreciative of you taking the time to share your insights as a local New Yorker and our representative to the United Nations and the Department of Global Communications in New York. So thanks again for taking the time, and definitely I'll see you soon.
Jason, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Mr. President, dear Rotary members, on behalf of Mrs. Audrey Azoulay, Director General of UNESCO, I am delighted to be here with you for the celebration of your 75 years of action together with the United Nations. As you all know, Rotary was present at the creation of the UN back in 1945. Rotary was also actively involved in the 1942 London Conference of Allied Ministers of Education, which led to the idea of UNESCO itself. And this year also marks 75 years of Rotary's cooperation with UNESCO. This twin anniversary is a symbol of Rotary's engagement for common good alongside the UN system. We were always united by a common goal, building peace and a better world, and we share the same concerns. We defend inclusive education everywhere, leaving no one behind, and ensuring gender equality. We promote a culture of peace and the values to build the defenses of peace in the minds. We are convinced of the power of dialogue as a source of tolerance and mutual respect. We believe in the benefits of science, technology, and scientific research and their contribution to sustainable development, and we are hardened with Rotary's important focus on the environment. As we look to our past cooperation, we look forward to 75 more years of continued cooperation. As I speak, we are laying the groundwork for a stronger and more focused partnership between UNESCO and the Rotary, especially in Africa. And today we are united in our efforts to fight the social, economic, and human impact of a COVID pandemic. We form wishes for the success of your meeting and that of the Rotary's work. Thank you for your attention.
Greetings, Rotarians and guests. It's a great pleasure to be with you today to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. Thank you for inviting us to update you on the Rotary representative networks of the United Nations. And as you've just heard, the history of the United Nations is closely entwined with Rotary. And we have the Rotary Representative Network, focused on conducting external outreach at the United Nations and beyond. I would like to share with you some examples of our work and how Rotary clubs can work with representatives and UN agencies. In the last year, we have strategized to build stronger, deeper, more productive relationships with key institutions to enable clubs and districts to work with these agencies. Because we believe we can increase the network's value as we broaden its mandate to strengthen Rotary projects and local engagement. So we have a three-paths approach, continuing our thought leadership and communications with our agencies, focusing on connections for humanitarian projects, and guiding clubs and districts outreach to in-country offices. And of course, aligning all of this with Rotary's 7 areas of focus, working with our Rotary action groups and international service chairs in districts. And I'd just like to share one example with you, the Peace Projects Incubator Project, which was organized by Ambassador Walter Geiger, our representative to the UN in Geneva. And he developed the Incubator Peace Project with the Rotary Action Group for Peace, and also the Peace Fellows and our alumni. And together they developed over 40 peace projects that are now all ready and looking for clubs to work with them. And I'm delighted that here with me today are 2 of our representatives, Dr. Rose Cardarelli, representative to UNICEF in New York, and past District Governor Joe Otin, representative to the UN Environment Programme in Nairobi. And they are both working to facilitate clubs to work on projects with these agencies. Joe, please can you tell us about the UNEP handbook, which you have helped develop with UNEP and with the Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group, and tell us how this will help clubs get engaged.
I'm so happy to be here today to talk a little bit about what we're doing with the UN Environment Program. When UN Environment Program approached us as Rotary to see what we could do and work around, in collaboration to support the environment and develop sustainable projects, one of the big ideas that they had was to have a very strong collaboration around World Environment Day, which was happening on the 5th of June. And so we came together, within our district, because the UN Environment Program is here in Nairobi, and but eventually evolved Rotary International and ISRAC, the Environment and Sustainability Rotary Action. And so together, we built together a handbook, an environment handbook, which clubs could use, and it's full of wonderful ideas that clubs can immediately start to put into practice, so that we can reverse the terrible effects of pollution and other negative effects that are happening on the environment across the world. So it's got wonderful ideas in this handbook. We will share a link. People can be able to download this handbook and begin to use it in their clubs immediately.
Thanks, Joe. And how timely this handbook, given that Rotary now has the new area of focus of the environment, And also, of course, this year, we have the UN Climate Change Conference taking place in Glasgow in November. And I'm working with others to make sure that Rotary is going to be engaged at the COP26 conference in November. And so I know this handbook will be extremely valuable for clubs and districts in getting involved in these projects in the future. Joe, what other ways are you working with clubs in Nairobi?
We've been spending a tremendous amount of time with the UN Environment team, developing the Adopt a River initiative for sustainable development. And what this initiative really is about, I guess what I'd call moving upstream. For so long, we've had a number of programs where we've been trying to clean up the rivers in Nairobi, in Kenya, and other parts of our district. But the quality of the water and the pollution is just getting worse. And so the Adopt a River program is really about going upstream. Not just going upstream on the within the rivers, but it's also going upstream in our partnerships, working with government and other organizations like UNEP. It's also about going upstream with our science and beginning to use science and real approaches that are going to have a long-term and sustainable effect on in reducing pollution and restoring our rivers. And so the Adopt a River program, we've developed a great framework. We've actually put a grant money behind it as well, created a core fund so that we can fund a number of the initiatives that the clubs are working on to clean up the rivers. And it's called Adopt a River because as an adoption program, if you're adopting a child, you're really putting a long-term commitment to see that child become successful, to grow up successfully and to be able to then take care of themselves. In the same way, we want the clubs to, adopt a certain part of the river and give it that long-term commitment to be able to reduce the pollution and to truly restore it and restore life in the rivers. The clubs have responded extremely well, and they've put in a number of proposals, and we will be handing out these. In the next day or so in April, we're going to be handing out or giving out the grants so that they can actually start their work. And we've been working closely with UNEP. We've done a number of town hall meetings, and the clubs are getting a tremendous amount of knowledge and skill to be able to carry this out. But we're also working with SRAG, and the officials of SRAG are giving us a tremendous amount of support, encouragement, and we're able to share knowledge with them as well. And finally, last year we created the first environment club in Africa. This environment club is a cause-based club, which means that the club is very specifically working on supporting the environment. We were really happy to hear that Rotary International and the Rotary Foundation has finally chosen environment as a area of focus, official area of focus. And so this environment club basically is leading on several initiatives to support the environment, to restore our river systems, to, when it comes to tree planting and afforestation. And they're generally leading a lot of those efforts. And we're finding that clubs are coming to them, and coming to the club members for that kind of expertise and to lead for the initiatives. The partnership that we signed a couple of years ago with United Nations Environment Program and Rotary is beginning to have a real impact in this part of the world. And what we'd like to see is for this kind of program to expand to other parts of the world, because we have both Rotary and UN Environment in every corner of this globe.
Thanks, Joe. That's a really excellent example of working in partnership with all these groups, the clubs, the agency, yourself as the representative. And what a great impact you're having. And this is a wonderful template for other clubs to do the same. You could do it anywhere in the world, because we have these environmental problems all over the world, not just in Africa. And it's so exciting to see the first environmental cause club in Africa being formed in Nairobi. Congratulations.
Thank you, Judith.
Another excellent example is the work that Dr. Rose Cardarelli, our Rotary representative to UNICEF in New York, is doing. And Rose, please could you share the work that you're doing with UNICEF?
I'm thrilled to be able to speak to you about the project I've been working on as an appointed Rotary representative to UNICEF. We all know that polio eradication has been our primary focus, and it will remain our primary focus and a major goal for our UNICEF partnership. But we recognize that Rotary is an incredibly large organization with 35,000 clubs and 1.2 million members around the world. And many of these clubs and districts support various issues beyond polio related to development, humanitarian response, and peace. So the project I'm working on with Rotary headquarters and a team of volunteers is a local collaboration handbook. This is going to be a resource guide for successful local in-country engagement and projects between Rotary clubs, districts, and UNICEF offices. These resulting projects will serve to educate, inspire acts of service, and empower and connect people with opportunities. Now, this guide will provide in-country introductions for successful engagement. It will reveal best practices and collaboration models. It will have a great impact through cooperation at the local and country level, and it will identify the types of support needed to encourage or sustain collaboration. Now, this project is all about a Qualtext survey, which has been designed to be in multiple languages, and it consists of qualitative and quantitative and COVID questions. And the distribution has begun. It has been sent to 800 Rotary members in 23 different countries. And UNICEF is surveying their countries and regional offices at this time, a total of 66 offices and possibly 190 countries when they're finished. And I will follow up with interviews that will be conducted in the April timeframe with select respondents to gain a deeper understanding of the current situation, some of the best practices and lessons learned, the potential challenge or opportunities that may be out there, and the measures of success for collaboration after we identify success stories, trends, and cautionary tales. The guide will be reviewed in May and then be released in the June timeframe. Now, this data that we'll collect during this analysis will provide us a unique opportunity for conducting successful collaborative service projects on a global scale from a local perspective. And I'm very happy to be able to be involved in this, and I really thank all the volunteers that have stepped up to help me with this project.
Thank you, Rose, for that important overview of the resource guide, which I'm sure will be most helpful for clubs establish projects with UNICEF in countries. And indeed, both of these handbooks, the UNEP handbook and the UNICEF handbook, these show the best practices, and I think also will become a template which other agencies can adopt and take forward with our work with the representative network and clubs and districts. And I know as well that you've just seen a video of the work of Dr. Josephine Ojiambo, our representative to the UN in Nairobi. And that clearly shows projects where you have clubs and representatives and agencies working together. So I hope that this has given you an insight into the representative network. And if you would like to learn more to develop projects with your clubs, feel free to contact me and I will connect you to the appropriate representative. We also have a representatives newsletter, which gives updates on the work of the network, which we're very happy to share with you. So thank you very much for this opportunity in explaining to you the work of the Representative Network. Take action
with the United Nations,
with the UN Environment Program,
with Rotary,
with UNICEF, with the United Nations,
with the World Food Program,
with UNESCO.
Take action with Rotary,
with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa,
with UNICEF,
with the United Nations,
with Food and Agricultural Organization,
and with the United Nations,
with UNESCO,
with Rotary, with UNICEF,
for gender equality and UN Women.
Today.
District 7230 is home to the United Nations Headquarters Complex, an architectural icon and interesting series of buildings containing important works of art. I sure remember touring the United Nations Headquarters during my first visit to New York City. Many of us have had an opportunity to peek inside the United Nations Headquarters as part of Rotary Day at the United Nations. Unfortunately, we can't visit there in person today, so let's take a virtual tour. I think our tour guide is waiting for us.
While the United Nations headquarters in New York is closed to the public due to the pandemic, the work of the organization continues. The United Nations Visitor Center has expanded its services to adapt to the new normal, introducing virtual tours and briefings. The virtual experience offers an exciting opportunity to explore the United Nations from the comfort of your home or place of learning. You will have a chance to meet live one of our multilingual tour guides who will take you on a virtual journey through the organization's headquarters and history and answer your questions. To sign up, it's super easy. Head over to visit.un.org to book your virtual experience today. We look forward to welcoming you. Visit the United Nations. It's your world.
Good morning. I'm Frank Wilkinson, president of the Rotary Club of North Shore in Staten Island, New York, and I'm here today with Stephanie Carty. Hi, Stephanie. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me today and our audience.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You know, as a proud New Yorker and Rotarian, of course, I'm a firm believer in taking advantage of all the opportunities our great city affords us. It wasn't until my first Rotary Day at the UN where we had the opportunity to sit in the General Assembly where it hits you and makes you wonder, wow, who sat here? What decision was made? As we listened to a group of speakers talking about Rotary and our long-standing connection with the United Nations and what we as people of action can do to make the world a better place. So Stephanie, tell our audience today, what is it that you do at the United Nations?
So I'm actually a public information assistant, also known as a tour guide. That means I bring people from all over the world around the UN headquarters, and I talk and I explain about the background, the history, and the work of the organization.
What is your favorite UN tour to give?
So there's a couple that are my favorite, but my absolute favorite is just the general public tours where anybody can buy tickets, and those are the most fun because you can get people from all over the world. You can get people from different ages, from different backgrounds, and it's interesting to have a conversation with them for an entire hour, but also to see the conversations that they have between them. Another type of tour that I love to give are actually the private art tours. And those are especially interesting and especially exciting because you get to show parts of the UN usually nobody ever really can see other than ambassadors and delegates. So it really makes it extra special.
Yeah, everybody wants that behind the scenes view at what actually happens there, right? That's cool.
Absolutely.
So what's one fact that usually surprises people? Because there's always something, right? You go on these tours and you have these great conversations, but there's the one thing that everybody goes, whoa, wow. What is it?
Yeah, so I would say the fact that most people get surprised by is how much the UN actually works on and how many decisions are actually taken in the organization that affect our lives directly. So people are always quite interested in knowing what the UN does, but sometimes it's hard to realize how much that decision by an organization such as the UN impacts our lives directly.
I'd be impressed by that too.
Yeah.
All right. So the United Nations is here in New York City, where we are today, and Rotary members live all over the world. So how do they have that opportunity to get the back scenes tour of the United Nations?
All right. So normally we would welcome, the Rotary community and anybody that would be interested in taking a tour to the UN headquarters. Now, with the pandemic going on, we would have to move to a more virtual setting. This is what we're offering right now. You're welcome to book a tour with us. We offer them in all the different languages at different times of the day, try to accommodate everybody as much as we can. For the Rotary community especially, we have a discount code for 20% off that you can use both in public tours as well as in group tours. So if you're interested in bringing your entire group with you to take a tour or virtual tour of the UN, we highly encourage that. So the discount code is actually Rotary VT, as in virtual tours, 2021.
And that code is special for this audience here, 20% off, and you have the opportunity to go check out what we could see here when we get to visit. Thank you for that opportunity, and I hope everyone takes advantage of it. Is there anything else our Rotary audience should keep in mind, or if they were to visit the UN, what's the one thing that they should make sure to see?
So I would definitely pay close attention to the chambers, the architecture, and especially the artworks that are in the UN. The United Nations, this is something that many people know. The United Nations actually has one of the most extensive art collections in the world. Sotheby's considers it to be a #1, which is actually possibly the highest ranking that any organization can get if they have a private art collection.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for spending some time with our audience this morning. I can't wait to get back to the UN, and I look forward to taking advantage of that virtual tour. And I hope all of you watching today join in and check out the virtual tours provided by the United Nations. So thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me, and we look forward to welcoming you soon.
Hello, I'm Past District Governor Matt Singmansson from New York and Bermuda. I'm also a founding member of Rotary Global History Fellowship, one of the biggest fellowships in Rotary. I want to thank the United Nations for its generous discount to Rotarians who are interested in the virtual tour of the UN. Rotary's relationship with the United Nations goes to when the United Nations was founded. Many of the original United Nations delegates were also Rotarians. The United States Department of State asked Rotary to develop the preamble of the United Nations for the United Nations statutes. And in return, we received a very gracious thank you letter from the Secretary of State, Edward Stettinius Jr. And we also have worked together with the United Nations on Polio Plus, where Rotary started this project, and we have now eliminated polio to more than 99.9% in the world. You can learn more about Rotary's history with the United Nations at Rotary Global History Fellowship's website, rghfhome.org. Thanks.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure here today to introduce you to two young leaders in action, Anna and Mario. My name is Merva Fadul, and I'm a Rotarian with the Rotary Club of New York City, Metro New York City. And I'm here today to moderate a conversation between two inspiring young people. Anna is joining me from New York City, and Mario is joining us from England. Hi, Anna. Hi, Mario.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. So basically, before we start to hear about all the projects you're working on, a brief introduction about myself. As I mentioned, I'm a Rotarian, but before I was a Rotarian, I was a Rotaractor, actually with the club that Anna belongs to, the Rotaract Club at the UN. And I joined that club when I moved to New York City, looking for friends and opportunities to get involved in my community. And little did I know that I would become a lifelong Rotarian and make lifelong friends, along the way. Professionally, I work for UNICEF. I'm a project manager at UNICEF headquarters here in New York City. And basically, throughout my career, I've been involved with young people and youth initiatives. And it's always very inspiring to see the energy that young people bring to the initiatives that, they work on. And basically, when we involve them in kind of problem solving, it's always a lot more effective and efficient. And that's the inspiration we're looking for. So I'm going to start with talking with Anna. Hi, Anna. I know you are a part of the Rotaract Club at the UN. You also are finishing your degree in nursing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'd love to learn more about what personally led you to be involved with Rotaract, and then we'll hear more a bit about the initiatives that you're working on.
Absolutely. So I initially got involved with Rotaract and Rotaract at the United Nations 5 years ago when I moved to New York City. I had just moved to the city, and I was looking for people who were inspired to do things. I had a job, I had that niche filled, but I wanted to do more, and I wanted to be more involved in my community. And I'd always heard about Rotary and Rotaract, and I had a good friend who was part of the club. So I decided to join, and I've loved it ever since. And I've been a member and been on the board, and I'm so thankful that I joined.
Great, that sounds like a great experience. So tell us a bit more about the Impulsive project, which you started. Take us back to the very beginning, how it started and where it is today.
Yeah, so the Impulsive project started about 5 years ago. I was living in a small area called San Felipe, Guatemala, and I was working in a clinic with malnourished children. And so during that time, I was able to spend a significant amount of time with the parents of the children in the clinic. And through that, I was able to have many conversations with them. And throughout these conversations, I learned about the issues that they faced when it came to cooking over an open fire, and how inhaling all of those fumes led to so many avoidable health issues, and also just the general aspect of the lack of healthcare and access to healthcare that they had, that it took roughly 5 hours to drive to the nearest hospital, which took time and money. So that's kind of where the Impulso project started, based on those conversations with those community members. So we first started off as fundraising for fuel-efficient cook stoves. So fuel-efficient cook stoves reduce smoke emissions by 95%. So that just means less smoke gets trapped into their homes. And we fundraised for this. All of the work we do is 100% by donations or by grants. And so we've been able to distribute over 100 fuel-efficient cook stoves to Guatemala, as well as administer nutrition classes. And both the nutrition classes and the cook stoves are all built by locals, and the nutrition classes are hosted by a local nutritionist. And the same thing in Peru. We designed a specific fuel-efficient stove that was best for the communities in Peru. And we have 3 full communities in the highlands of Cusco, Peru, that all have fuel-efficient cook stoves. All the families in those communities have cook stoves. And since then, we've expanded, and now we're traveling down with medical professionals and giving free medical services. We're setting up mobile clinics in the really remote areas, the same areas where we're distributing the fuel-efficient cook stoves. And so that is how we got involved. And we've partnered with the local Rotaract clubs in Guatemala to help us with the distribution and all of the on-the-ground work. And our Rotaract club at the United Nations has really adopted it and has helped us fundraise for it. And we have so many volunteers from the club that are helping us with the website and the process and whatnot. So it's been really great.
That sounds great. I'm very happy to hear that there's a collaboration between Rotaractors at your club and local Rotaractors as well. As final thoughts, can you let us know what the Rotary family, specifically Rotarians or maybe other Rotaractors, can do to help you with this initiative or to help strengthen your club further?
So at the Rotaract Club at the United Nations, after this is having a fundraiser social event, so people can attend that. So again, all of our work is based on, a lot of it is based on donations. So if people would like to donate, but again, we also are in need of volunteers, whether you're a medical professional or just a general volunteer, we would love to have you come down on one of our trips or help out with the website and whatnot. Also just getting the word out that these are issues and they are things that should be talked about. So those are 3 things that I think would be really helpful.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Anna.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure talking to you. You heard it. She needs, or the club needs volunteers. They need donations, and you can find out more through getting in touch with the Rotaract Club at the United Nations. Next, I would love to introduce Mario. Mario has been an interactor and a Rotaractor. and has some very exciting work to tell us more about.
Yeah, the idea for Interchange was quite simple. We thought about the possibility that interactors all around the world could work together to solve certain problems. And the idea was started from a very simple thought that we ourselves had. We started as interactors in Austria, and Interact was the first time we got connected with other young people who were in some sense driven by the same idea within Austria. And that's what brought us together. And there was not much to push us to the idea that why can't we connect interactors more broadly, maybe across Europe or even worldwide, if we try to draw on this network, because we realized, okay, Interact is not an organization that's just local to Austria, as one might expect, but there are more than 300,000 interactors all over the world. And we just started with a brute force method. We just reached out to Interact clubs in different countries. We messaged them via social media, via the Rotary clubs, and tried to get in touch with them and try to find out if this is something they're interested in, like making connections across borders and friendships across borders. And we realized that there's huge interest in that, and no one really understands why this hasn't happened before, because it works very well on the Rotary level, it works great on the Rotaract level, but interactors hadn't been connected in that way before. So we started to put those people together and try to get them into contact. And within a couple of months, this initiative spread further and further into countries across Europe, then in South America, then in North America, Africa, and so on. And we organized events in several countries with up to 600 participants at one time. And I think no interactor will ever forget the experience. I certainly won't forget this experience. So we said, okay, that's amazing. We have this energy going. We have this momentum to have young people do something. Can we channel this in a direction? And that's when we said, okay, we want to focus on a goal that we can achieve. And because we are all young people and we arguably massively benefited from the education that we received, we figured that every child in the world should have this opportunity as well. That maybe made all the difference for us. So we thought about how we can do something to increase the access to education. And that was when we reached out to UNICEF. First to the UNICEF office in Austria, but they quickly passed us on to the UNICEF office in Geneva, because they said, okay, this is actually international, so you might benefit from that. And they said, okay, but you also have clubs in Latin America, in North America, and so on. Maybe contacts to UNICEF and the United Nations may be more appropriate. And this is how we agreed with UNICEF to work to establish a connection between local Interact clubs and the UNICEF national offices in different countries.
It's extremely inspiring. And yeah, if I can think of the parallels between UNICEF being present in almost every country and territory in the world, and I think Rotary is also present in all of these countries. So the synergy is just natural. Any last thoughts about specifically what Rotarians can do, and maybe what other Rotaractors and interactors who might be listening to us can do to get involved and help support this initiative further?
Yes, two things come to my mind. On the one hand, maybe a piece of advice or a question to Rotarians. If I put myself back in the position of an interactor, I experienced it way too often that just because of my age, because I was 17, people said, "Oh no, this is nothing serious. Like you're not actually doing anything big, so we are not supporting you in the way that would be best." And it took a while for some people were on board immediately. Some people took a couple of months or even years to understand that young people can actually do something that's quite big and makes a difference. So I would recommend to all Rotary clubs not to jump to any conclusions, but to try to encourage interactors to do things in that direction. And for interactors, the most exciting opportunity at the moment with Interchange is probably a very recent development. which is the establishment of a global Interact advisory board that advises the Rotary International Board of Directors, which was just agreed on a couple of months ago. And that was the initial idea of Interchange in the very beginning, that we at some point have this formal representation and this establishment that connects interactors all around the world. And this is actually the next big step that Interact is moving to when the board starts to operate in July. And we hope that this actually finally closes the gap between interactors all over the world. And I encourage everyone to get involved as soon as this opportunity is open.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much, Mario. Again, very inspiring stories. And I'm very happy to hear about your success and wish you the best as you move forward with this initiative.
Thank you.
So this has been an inspiration for me, and I hope it's been an inspiration for everyone. I think their words speak for themselves when they say get involved, whether, whatever age you are, whatever stage of your career you're in, you can help get involved. So thank you very much. We still have one inspiring story from an interactor in Italy, Jacopo. So let's go to that and hear about his story.
Hello everyone, my name is Jacopo, I'm from Italy, and I am the president of the local Interact club of my city, Rimini, as well as a UNICEF volunteer. Throughout this hard months of pandemic, we saw multiple challenges, and we decided to take on a few of them. The two main challenges that we decided to face were the sort of technological challenge and the online learning challenge, as well as an environmental one. In fact, we ourselves are students, and we saw the importance of having the appropriate equipment to properly not miss on the learning process that the sort of distant online learning brought us to do. In this regard, we worked a lot with local communities, especially underprivileged communities, to make sure that everyone had equal access to the same devices in order not to spur division. In fact, we saw the pandemic as an opportunity to unite our country and our communities, to show solidarity and unity, rather than as a catalyst to further enforce divisions and exacerbate them. The second challenge was the environmental one. Throughout the pandemic, we saw exponential increase in disposable masks and gloves. And although we're really grateful to everyone utilizing masks and other equipment, we do acknowledge the sort of environmental impact that this brings with it. For this reason, we organized multiple events of garbage picking on our local shores, and we are committed to continue to do so. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you guys will have an amazing day. Bye!
What is Rotary? Rotary is a voluntary, non-profit, non-governmental, non-religious organization of industry professionals and academics working in intertwined autonomous networks providing self-education, exchange of knowledge, and humanitarian aid. It might sound complex, but it's built on a very simple philosophy. You go through life, working, studying, and taking care of your loved ones. But at some point, you might stop and feel a spark, an urge to not only do good, but to help others as well as yourself. Throughout life, you've had tons of ideas. All of them might not have been the most complex or the most developed, but it's the thought that counts, isn't it? When an idea is introduced into the Rotarian network, and we exchange thoughts, knowledge, and experience, ideas grow along with ourselves and are brought into reality. That is what Rotary is. We know that simple thoughts can become the beginning of something huge and life-changing for millions of people around the world. For us, it has led to projects like local mentorship programs, providing clean water, building schools, disease awareness campaigns, scholarships, exchange programs, wigs for cancer patients, teaching kids karate, providing medical care, blood donations, fighting illiteracy, protecting mothers and children, and emergency food supplies. And to think that our first project was a public toilet, And now we're on the brink of eradicating polio. We believe that with the right people, the smallest thing can make a huge difference. So when you feel the spark, remember Rotary.
Hi, I'm Jan Holz, and I'm the past president of the Rotary Club of Wall Street, New York.
I am Dominique Bazin, a past assistant governor of Haiti.
My name is Albert Davis. I'm the foundation chair for the Rotary E-Club of Wall Street, New York.
Building a school in Haiti was a fun project that we did this year. We used district grants and donations from members. The project develops young leaders at an early age. In addition, the project helped us develop global relations with Rotarians and Rotaractors.
In addition to building the school, we worked together with the Rotary Club of Petuel to host an online concert for raising funds for a global grant to support the fight against COVID-19.
And stay tuned about Rotary's support United Nations and their Sustainable Development Goals.
Aí, Bobo! C'est ça va petit son pensée, son fait, qui pour en harmonie. Oh, yeah.
Tu nous révoltes, yo tout acaba. Yes.
Tu nous révoltes,
yo tout acaba. Yes.
Tu nous révoltes, révoltes,
yo tout acaba. Yes.
Tu nous révoltes,
yo tout acaba. Yes.
harmonie.
Yes.
Vérité.
Yes.
Vérité. Vérité.
Yes. Natasha. Natasha. Yo well. Yo well. You 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 well. We well. You well. You well. You well. You well. Ooh,
Aïe bobo. M'ba nous même sentir nous. Aïe aïe aïe. En cœur, nous sentir nous. Nous sentir ça nous connecter. C'est important pour nous garder culture, pour nous garder valeur culture nous, pour nous garder plantes médicinales nous. Trésors qui sortent en Afrique, qui sortent dans nos ancêtres nous tous amérindiens, qui ba nous trésors ça dans tout pays aujourd'hui médecin feuille. Même l'endormi au bon remède. Pas jouer, c'est bon jouer notre culture. Faut nous pas jouer avec ça. Ça remède là, il fait médicament. C'est remède il prend, c'est feuille il prend. Ça feuille, il fait médicament. Avec feuille. Donc feuille ça, c'est banou comme cadeau. Et ba nous connaissance dans tout. Continuez à prendre thé nous, prendre thé nous. Oui. Il y a un pile qui est bon pour le corps. C'est comme ça que vous mettez la télé. Aïe bobo. Nous ne pouvons pas quitter la culture nous sur le côté. Quand on va égarer, non? Ça qui vient avant, chimique, bagage chimique, ou bien bagage naturel. Ça qui vient avant. Nous faisons bagage chimique plus confiance que bagage naturel. C'est ça qui fait nous mépriser la culture comme ça. À travers l'école, à travers les parents, à travers tout, nous fait nous mépriser la culture, nous, ça que nous y est. Nous songeons. Babsa, oublié. Jour que nous te dit que nous pourrons jouer musique pays. Jouer musique vaudou. Yeah, c'est pas faute, non? Tu potion qui.
È un onore per il distretto rotariano 2080 essere coorganizzatore di questo evento internazionale che sancisce l'importanza strategica della collaborazione tra Rotary International e Nazioni Unite. Il Rotary è una rete globale che unisce in tutto il mondo 1.200.000 uomini e donne. Il distretto rotariano 2080, di cui sono il governatore, è uno dei 13 distretti italiani e raccoglie tutti i club del Lazio e della Sardegna. 3.300 soci riuniti in 95 club Rotary. In tutti i paesi del mondo i club sono 35.000, tutti impegnati nel realizzare moltissimi progetti per favorire la crescita delle loro comunità. Per la sua diffusione capillare e la sua professionalità dei suoi soci, il Rotary può dunque contare su una struttura particolarmente efficace nel realizzare grandi iniziative globali e specifici progetti locali. Anche la pandemia che stiamo combattendo da molti mesi ci vede impegnati su più fronti, sia negli interventi quotidiani che nell'attività di prevenzione. E ormai da anni le Nazioni Unite e Rotary collaborano nella realizzazione di grandi programmi internazionali. Una collaborazione che trova nuova linfa in questi giorni grazie all'appuntamento per il 75° anniversario dell'ONU, che sarà sviluppata ancora maggiore efficacia in futuro. Il tema scelto dal presidente del Rotary International, Holger Knack, è il Rotary crea opportunità, perché i rotariani hanno raggiunto un elevato livello di efficienza nel trasformare le crisi in opportunità. Ne è un esempio la qualità delle iniziative che abbiamo adottato a livello globale contro la pandemia. Sono sicuro che la collaborazione tra Nazioni Unite e Rotary International permetterà di affrontare con accresciuta capacità di intervento tutte le altre crisi che l'umanità potrà trovarsi di fronte nei prossimi decenni. Perché sia l'ONU che il Rotary hanno un metodo di lavoro collaudato che consiste nel mettersi al servizio degli altri ed hanno un obiettivo comune, che è quello della pace tra i popoli.
Welcome Holger Knack, Rotary International President 2020-21 and Rotary member of the Rotary Club of Herzogtum Lauenburg-Mölln in Germany. District Governor Mary Shackleton of District 7-30, and I, Suzanne Schwartz, member of the Rotary E-Club of Wall Street, are very excited to welcome you back here today in a very special year, which was full of virtual meetings and opened a lot of opportunities, like the one today for us to follow up on our meeting we had on World Polio Day in October 2020.
Hi, Willkommen, President Holger. Thank you for your leadership and inspiration during this most challenging but opportunity-filled year. You're leading off a session that will focus on your theme, seizing opportunities for action. So our question for you is, as Rotary International President, how do you see the relationship between Rotary International and the Sustainable Development Goals?
Thank you very much, Mary, and thank you very much, Susan. And thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure for me, again, to be with you here, even if it's just virtual. Yes, it's my pleasure to speak to you about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and Rotary International. Rotary members carry out sustainable humanitarian projects that supports the United Nations goals. We do this through our areas of focus, which are promoting peace, fighting disease, providing clean water, supporting education, saving mothers and children, growing local economies, and protecting the environment. Our areas of focus align with many of the United Nations goals. For example, our long-standing efforts to eradicate polio align with the goals for good health and partnerships. And we are partner of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative with WHO, UNICEF, both United Nations agencies, and CDC and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Since this partnership was formed in 1988, the number of polio cases worldwide has dropped by 99.9%, and 16 million people are walking today who would otherwise have been paralyzed. The infrastructure created to fight polio is used to battle COVID-19. In addition, Rotary has granted roughly $40 million since March 2020 for community-based COVID-19 response efforts, such as providing hospital equipment, protect medical gear, and support items for frontline medical workers. Rotary's commitment to child and maternal health helps fulfill the health and partnership goals as well. Our members carried out projects to improve training, provide essential medical equipment, and support family planning in Nigeria. And by the way, just 3 weeks ago, we had a meeting with WHO General Director Tedros, Dr. Tedros, and this was really successful, really to put emphasis on the partnership between WHO and Rotary. And then water and sanitation projects also help meet the health and partnership goals while also adding clean water. The impact of this work is incredible. And I'll just give you one example. Working with our partners, 80% of the people in Ghana now have clean water to fight guinea worm disease. Our commitment development goals align with 4 United Nations goals. Rotary clubs sponsored a microfinance project that provides training in sewing, baking, and business management for poor women in Ecuador, along with small loans that enable them to start or expand their businesses. Our work in basic education and literacy aligns with 5 different United Nations sustainability goals. In Afghanistan, Rotary members opened a girls' school to break the cycle of poverty and social imbalance. Rotary's commitment to peace and conflict resolutions help fulfill the peace and justice goal, as well as partnerships. Rotaractors in the Philippines and Italy developed an anti-bullying campaign to teach children how to handle conflict peacefully from an early age. And just this year, Rotary added a new area of focus on the environment. And this significantly expands our potential to help support a number of the United Nations goals. While this is official area of focus is something new, Rotary has long been committed to protecting the environment. Through existing areas, we have supported sustainable community-based solutions with nearly 20 million in global grants over the last 5 years, ranging from beekeeping in Germany to rainwater harvesting at schools in Jordan. Through our fight to end polio, Rotary has shown what we can do when we draw on the collective strengths of our partners and national governments. Adding our environmental focus creates an opportunity for us to learn new ways to making meaningful and measurable impact. Rotary is pleased to support the United Nations goals through our global projects. The Rotary motto of service above self is needed now more than ever. And we hope a renewed focus on sustainability will help the world recover from the current pandemic and blaze a path towards a brighter future. Rotarians will do everything they can to make this happen. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Holger. That was so inspiring. So what would you say is a good call for action to all our guests today, the Rotarians, the Rotaractors, the Interactors, and everybody who's new basically to Rotary or the United Nations?
Thank you, Suzanne. Yes, that's very simple. Rotarians all over the world, take action now.
Rotarians, thank you for your invitation to take part in today's event celebrating Rotary's long-standing relationship with the United Nations. As the CEO of UNICEF USA, I want to express our gratitude to Rotarians around the world for our ongoing partnership to eradicate polio. Rotary is truly one of UNICEF's most cherished partners, and we are grateful for your commitment to our work together. We are close, so close to ridding the world of polio for good, with only Afghanistan and Pakistan remaining endemic for wild polio. We would not have gotten to this point without the leadership and vision of Rotary and its members. This year has presented challenges like no other. The COVID-19 pandemic put polio campaigns on hold for months, threatening a resurgence of the disease. But thanks to your sustaining support, we were able to have the teams and supplies in place to quickly resume polio vaccination campaigns as soon as it was safe. At the same time, the polio infrastructure that we have built together has proven invaluable in the response to COVID-19. Frontline polio workers pivoted quickly to educate communities on the importance of hand washing and worked on disease surveillance. And now the systems put in place for polio campaigns have been critical in dealing with the massive logistics associated with COVID vaccine distribution. We need to stay the course in our work to end polio forever, even as we fight COVID-19. Routine immunizations, including polio vaccines, are critical to ensuring we don't backslide on the incredible progress we've made. And so I leave you with this call to action. Keep up our good fight to eradicate polio. The work within the Global Polio Eradication Initiative would not be as successful as it has been without each and every Rotarian. We need you, now more than ever, to continue to lift your voices, to advocate that vaccines work, to raise critical funds to keep these vaccine campaigns going, and to show the world what is possible when we think big. Thank you for all that you do. Rotary's work alongside UNICEF and in collaboration with the United Nations is critical and life-saving work. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. The Rotary family values our partnership and shared goals. We have another very special guest representing UNICEF today, actress Taya Leone. You may recognize her as Madam Secretary or from one of her many other film and television roles. Not only is Taya an actress, she's also a humanitarian. She's a board member of UNICEF USA and a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador. Thank you for being with us, Taya. Let's start with some questions. In Rotary, we talk about Rotary moments, that instance in time that affirms our involvement in Rotary. What is your UNICEF moment?
Well, it's interesting because I think I share a UNICEF moment with a lot of people, which is as a kid carrying an orange box on trick or treat. And it's funny, growing up in a family of UNICEF, I would say my first real connection to UNICEF was really the orange box, as opposed to a dinner conversation. And it was through that action, going door to door and picking up pennies and nickels and quarters when I was lucky, that I began to be very aware that I was taking action on behalf of other children I didn't know, not necessarily children in my classroom, but children on the other side of the globe. That was probably my first aha moment. I think probably my most intense aha moment with UNICEF was in the field when I was in Jordan visiting the Zaatari camp. And I had been in the field quite a bit prior, and there are always moments that move you and solidify your commitment to what you're doing. But at that particular, on that particular trip, I witnessed a gesture that I've never forgotten. And we were at the camp visiting with some children outside of the maternity ward, as it was. And there had been a small group of children that had been following us around. And we gave them some cookies that we got from this center. And I saw this boy who looked to be about 11 years old break his cookie that he got into pieces and feed these two other children that were with him. I've just never forgotten that. This child was really the expression of an absolute innocent, driven heart that we all have access to inside of each of us, and I'll just never forget that.
What a great story. And I think a lot of us remember trick-or-treating for UNICEF, so we remember those orange boxes too. Her grandmother has been called the founding spirit of UNICEF. What was it like growing up among such a strong family of people of action?
Well, I'm just laughing because, you know, some people have asked me, you know, what was it like with your grandmother? And did she teach you all about everything? And to be honest, for the first probably 10 years of my life, I was so much more impressed that she had been an actress and had worked in a silent film and gotten billing above Clara Bow, who even I knew who Clara Bow was. So to me, she was this glorious actress, and I thought that's why she got so much attention. And it was only as I began to join, yes, those dinner conversations and traveling with UNICEF, where I really got the sense of her impact, but also where I started to realize that as a mother, when I'm bringing up my two children, that people say, how do you teach this empathy or this interest in being a part of the world as somebody who takes action to protect children or the vulnerable? And I think, honestly, I did. I grew up in a family of people like this. My grandmother, for obvious reasons, and then my dad, who served on the board and was chair of the board, and my mother, who had a very, very strong sense of justice. And I saw her mete that out daily. I had a good, I'm impressed with my my parents and my grandmother. I have to say, I want to live up to what they've accomplished in the world, for sure.
Thank you so much. A lot of us have that foundation of family, and I think a lot of Rotarians are Rotarians because of their family members. I know that I am, and it's great that you're continuing a real legacy of your family. So that's fabulous. Rotary's areas of focus align with the Sustainable Development Goals. Is there a particular Sustainable Development Goal you are committed to achieving?
How much time do you have? Actually, you know, it's interesting because I look at the Sustainable Development Goals and I realize that all of these SDGs are dependent on each other. Their success is each one attached, sort of like the roots of a tree. It would be hard to sort of break one away. For instance, I think about climate change. Ultimately, we'll need this planet to achieve what we're trying to achieve. And we know that climate change unfairly impacts children and vulnerable persons. But when I look at the goals, I have to say that I think it's SDG 17, which speaks to partnerships. And I think that is the key thing that I want to focus on, because none of us can do this alone. No organization, no country, no people. This is to achieve these goals and to further them. We're going to need the participation of all of us. And so I'm focused on partnerships like the UNICEF Rotary partnership. These need to be maintained and strengthened and supported. And that's what I'm going to focus on.
As you know, for almost 30 years, UNICEF has been a partner with Rotary in the initiative to eradicate polio worldwide. And we're so grateful for that partnership. And hopefully very soon, we're going to be counting down to 0. And that network will actually be used to help address the challenge, the horror of COVID-19. So we're really looking forward to continuing that partnership.
I love this partnership. And I think that what I want to focus on just in this moment, what are the greatest challenges that UNICEF is facing right now, given this global pandemic. On the one hand, we've been preparing for this for 75 years. UNICEF as a leader in vaccines and vaccinations, I should say. I think our biggest challenge that we don't speak about as much, but we would with our partners, is that COVID-19 has drastically disrupted our vaccine schedules around the world. And as we know, diseases like measles, like polio, can very quickly get a toehold. And I think that was our first major concern with lockdown when that began to happen around the world. And it continues to be because, as you said, we're looking to get to zero for polio. And this has been a disruption. So what UNICEF needs, what we all need to focus on is, I think in particular, the support of this vaccine and helping people to understand that the vaccines are not just for us. This is something that we do for everyone. And we won't get there without these vaccinations getting into arms. And then we'll be able to follow up with all the progress that we have made towards eradicating diseases like polio and measles. UNICEF has committed 2 billion vaccines in the year 2021 to be equitably distributed, which is another really important issue and one that we're very well versed in handling. But we're all going to need the funding moving forward for sure.
Well, thank you, Taya, and please, Rotarians and all of our audience, give to the Polio Plus Fund. That plus means work supporting COVID-19 vaccination and other really important public health initiatives. So please be generous to the Polio Plus Fund. And with that, Taya, I want to thank you for your time today, your service. And if you have any final thoughts to share with our audience, we'd love to hear them.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your support and the partnership, and just thank you for what you're doing in the world. I think every now and again we have to kind of appreciate and acknowledge and be grateful to each other. And I'm incredibly grateful for a fellow organization working this hard and this committed for this long. We're impressive.
UNICEF is just one of the organizations that the Rotary family proudly supports. Let's hear from another organization that opens opportunities to take meaningful action.
Hi everybody, I'm Dominique Hyde. I am so happy to be with you today. I'm the Director of External Relations at UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency. I'm so delighted and proud that Rotary and the UN entities have worked together for 75 years to create a world where people unite and take action for lasting change. I so wish I could be with you today. When you think of 11-year-old girls, what do you think of? I think of girls who love to laugh, hang out with their friends, and who are excited and can't wait to grow up and conquer the world. But Namat is already an adult.
أنا عمري 11 بس بحس حالي عمري 100. أخي الصغير ما بيقول لي أختي بيقول لي ماما. إنه حسب الشيء الحال اللي نحن فيها. يعني بدي أعين أهلي، بدي أعين أخواتي. يعني ما لهم غيري يعني كبيرة.
Namat is one of many Syrian refugee girls who's been forced to grow up far too quickly because of war. And she's one of the reasons why I'm here with you today. By continuing to work together, we can make this world such a much better place for all. This is what the Sustainable Development Goals are about. A core principle of the 2030 Agenda is to leave no one behind. But refugees and displaced people are among those furthest behind when it comes to achieving the SDGs. Their vulnerable situations make them disproportionately affected by poverty. COVID-19 has made everything worse. More refugee children are out of school, especially girls. More refugee women have suffered from gender-based violence. Refugees like Namat and her family are people like you and me. We wouldn't choose to be refugees, and neither did they. No one chooses to be a refugee, but we can choose to help. This is where you come in, to help spread the message that refugees are people like you and me, that they bring knowledge and ideas and contribute to the societies they seek refuge in. We simply cannot achieve the SDGs unless we work together. We owe it to our families and to future generations to make this world better. So girls like Namat don't have to grow up so quickly. So just like our daughters and granddaughters, they can dream and someday run the world.
الإضاعة جزء من طفولتي، بس يعني الجزء الآخر يعني هو مثل التعليم، مثل الدراسة، مثل تأسيس المستقبل، لا.
Welcome back. Once again, my name is Wayne Charles II. And in addition to my role today as program co-chair and also the assistant governor of District 7230, I'm also proud to say that I am a Rotary representative at the United Nations in New York. Today, we have two Rotarians, Ms. Danielle De La Fuente and Ms. Helen Reisler, who are actively supporting the advancement of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Danielle, please share with us your experience with the Mall Alliance and how you make an impact on the lives of the youth. Thank you, Danielle.
Thanks, Wayne, and hello, fellow Rotarians and friends of Rotary. I am delighted to share our experience collaborating with UNHCR and other UN agencies to respond to these unprecedented times. At a Mall Alliance, our mission is to empower displaced and disenfranchised children through 4 pillars of support. So we have social emotional learning, early childhood development, psychosocial support, and peace education. Prior to COVID, we had been serving both refugee and host community children in Greece, Lebanon, and Turkey through our award-winning Rainbow of Education. But then the COVID pandemic hit, undoubtedly disrupting education and leaving 200 million pre-primary and school-age children out of school. Not only was the learning interrupted, but COVID added significant toxic stressors to optimal child development, leaving marginalized communities especially vulnerable. At the very onset of the pandemic, we spearheaded a COVID-19 emergency response consortium, which sought to support the well-being of caregivers and their children through practical activities and coping mechanisms. Distributed in 4 languages, primarily via WhatsApp and through UN partners such as the Office of Violence Against Children, the podcast reached 543 organizations and a whopping 160,000 users. Our creative response led to winning UNHCR's COVID-19 challenge from the Humanitarian Education Accelerator. This was no easy feat. After a grueling competition, it culminated in weeks of UN boot camp. Yes, that is really a thing. And program design and many one-on-one sessions with leading experts to design an education and emergencies prototype, now called Colors of Kindness. Colors of Kindness is a forward-facing, innovative edtech solution that helps children grow in their social and emotional competencies. This holistic hybrid eases the transition back into the classroom and strengthens the mental health and well-being of the child. Designed to be used on any tech platform or offline for those that don't have connectivity, this snapshot guides you through the user experience, the audio, the instructions for the teacher, as well as the visual aid. Each episode is accompanied by a digital workbook that features our adorable, culturally sensitive, non-gendered blobs. And one of my favorite components is the emotions thermometer, which assesses the learner's emotional temperature. Once ready, the program was piloted in Bangladesh including a cohort of Rohingya refugees at UNICEF centers in Cox's Bazar. The results were amazing. We showed a dramatic 16.5% increase in social and emotional competencies in only 10 weeks' time. And 99% of caregivers noted that their children's behavior and mood had improved very, very positively. And most importantly, we had 0 infections. None of the children, the teachers, or the families of those that participated got sick through this test cycle. Notably, our work advances 5 of the Sustainable Development Goals, and we were very fortunate to be nominated among the top 3 nominees for Education Alliance's Award for Crisis and Conflict Response. Working with our UN partners and colleagues undoubtedly propelled our work forward and helped establish a scalable prototype and model that can serve all children that are out of school. I call on you today to help bring colors of kindness to refugee children, to children out of school, to as many as possible, so we can counteract the negative effects of the pandemic and help children heal, learn, and thrive. Thank you.
Hello, once again, it's my absolute honor and pleasure to introduce to everyone Ms. Helen Reisler. Helen is a Rotarian that truly exemplifies the term or our motto, service above self. She has served at the Rotary International level, the district level, and the club level. She may be most known for her efforts to raise funds for 9/11 as the president of the Rotary Club of New York. Also, she's the past district governor for Rotary District 7230. Helen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Being a Rotarian and an international speaker, I've had the unique opportunity to contribute so meaningfully to the remarkable partnership between Rotary International and the United Nations, and in so doing, help with the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals.
How do you encourage the youth to support the UN's SDGs?
I've spoken at many global model UN conferences in New York City and other parts of the world. Quite a few of the young people in the audience aspire to be ambassadors and diplomats, and they tell me that they have learned that violence doesn't work. They're eager to learn about other more peaceful and productive ways to make positive changes in their countries. They look to the United Nations for this opportunity. And these 4 days conferences, which are actual simulations of the UN, give them the opportunity to actually role play delegates, stimulate UN committees, and defend the positions of countries they had been unfamiliar with. My talks are meant to be inspirational and educational, and it's not unusual to have an audience of 1,700 youngsters from various countries. Some are Rotaractors and Interactors. I share the skills they will need in order to process what they've learned into the real world. For instance, the essentials of good leadership, gender teamwork, how to implement a sustainable development goal, public speaking, and self-development. In 2018, a young man from Sierra Leone was in the audience. When he returned home, I received an email request asking me to be his mentor, and I've been guiding him ever since. He just bought a piece of land in his village to build a school and is an activist for women's rights. Last year, another young man from Ethiopia approached me at the UN to thank me for a previous talk where I explained how to use emotional intelligence. He said it has enabled him to successfully start a small business. Mentoring really makes a difference. During the pandemic, I have spoken virtually at the Sierra Leone UN 75 dialogue, focusing on listening to what young people have to say about their fears, hopes, and the ideas they have for solving problems, and what the world needs to do together to take action. I was part of the Rotary representative team for 10 years, where I brought Rotaractors in from various countries to highlight their club's sustainable development projects. And I moderated panels such as peace and conflict resolution and others. Another Rotarian and I have produced other humanitarian videos highlighting individual club projects, showing how we implement the SDGs. I was actually able to get 4 of these videos on public television. For 3 years, I moderated the international breakfast meetings at the UN, sponsored by my New York Rotary Club, the Rotary Action Group, and our Rotaract Club at the UN. I interviewed ambassadors and other significant UN members. Up to 60 Rotarians and guests would show up, and it was streamed around the Rotary world. Our clubs solve the problems presented to the United Nations through our many projects which address the Sustainable Development Goals. It's such a perfect partnership, but we still have much to do together.
The United Nations offers NGOs an opportunity to become affiliated through its Department of Global Communications, also known as DGC. Rotary International is officially affiliated with DGC as a civil society organization. I encourage you to explore how your own NGO or your club's NGO partners can also become affiliated.
Fellow Rotarians, let me offer some observations on my experiences with the United Nations and the Rotary organization in my present capacity as a Rotarian and District International Cooperation Chair. I think I can confidently say that I have enjoyed the best of both worlds, based on my considerable association with the United Nations and the Rotary organization over a good period of my adult life. These organizations have shared vision, value, and mission, which deeply resonate with me, to which I've devoted much of my career and service. The one important and key area where the United Nations and the Rotary have a common interest is in the area of peace. And often people, when they think of peace, they think of mainly the cessation of hostilities and the signing of a formal agreement. But that is actually when the work of peace begins. The real challenge confronting peacemakers is the need to consolidate that peace and make it last. And usually when a peace agreement has been signed and a country has emerged from a conflict situation, there's a long list of problems that come with it. The post-conflict resettlement problems. For example, where there have been combatants, you have to arrange to demobilize these combatants, try to resettle them in society. Many of them have not known any occupation in their lives except fighting. And often the infrastructure of a country has been destroyed, the roads, the schools, education, medical services, etc. Families dislocated as a result of the conflict. And so the formal cessation of hostilities and the signing of a peace agreement is just the beginning of addressing these problems. And the country itself, because of the conflict that it has endured, does not usually have the resources and manpower to deal with these problems. And so the UN and other international organizations have to step in, including Rotary. Now, the UN generally deals with broad issues, broad problems, and does not or may not have the resources and the capability to address smaller local issues. For example, the rebuilding of a well or restoring a school or building a road or something like that. Its task tends to end once an agreement has been signed. And I think this is where Rotary, with its grant resources, could step in and employ the services of the cadre of technical advisors to address and help the countries deal with these minor problems or local problems. And so you could say that the UN addresses the major problem and Rotary comes in to fill the gaps with dealing with the more minor and local problems. My involvement in the pursuit of peace, both with the United Nations and currently with the Rotary, is something that I value very much, and I really encourage my fellow Rotarians to focus on that as well. It is through peace that we lay the foundation for progress. And it is the achievement of peace that gives meaning and value to our work as Rotarians. And so I really would encourage my fellow Rotarians and all others to give this particular area their full attention and their interest. So thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Anna Cutter-Patel, and I'm a proud Rotary Peace Fellow. I received my certificate in peace building from the Rotary Peace Center in Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok, Thailand in 2016. I'm one of over 1,500 Rotary Peace Fellows now working in 115 countries. Each year, the Rotary Foundation awards up to 50 fellowships for master's degrees and 80 for mid-career certificate studies. Many alumni of this program serve as leaders in government, NGOs, law enforcement, and international organizations such as the United Nations and the World Bank. 7 peace centers connected to world universities internationally work as partners with Rotary to provide professional learning experiences for peace builders internationally. I can tell you from my own experience that the Rotary Peace Fellowship is an extraordinary learning opportunity with people who believe in peace and a world free of conflict from all sorts of disciplines and professional backgrounds. Really an extraordinary experience. I am still in very close touch with all 23 of the fellows who were with me in 2016 and consider them very close friends and a strong professional and personal friend community. Now we will hear from Dr. Sharif El-Nagahi, a chief judge in the Cairo Economic Court in Egypt and consultant to the Saudi Ministry of Justice for Mediation and Dispute Resolution Affairs, visiting professor at British University in Cairo, and a mediator of the Global Mediation Panel of the Office of the Ombudsman for UN funds and programs at the United Nations. Sharif was a fellow with me in 2016, and so it gives me great pleasure to welcome my friend and someone who I greatly admire in his professional capacity to tell us a little bit about himself, his experience as a Rotary Peace Fellow, and how it has influenced and impacted his current work as a mediator in universities, with governments, and for the United Nations. Hi, Sharif. Sharif, please tell us a little bit about how the Rotary Peace Fellowship influenced or impacted your current work as a mediator.
Thank you, Anna. To be quite honest, working as a judge and in the legal framework, you see the limitation of the classical justice of the courts. And I thought that mediation, or I wanted to explore that, can mediation deliver justice to the parties? Because I'm a true believer that you cannot settle a dispute between any two parties without implementing some sense of fairness and justice to these parties. After the fellowship or during the fellowship, I have learned a lot about peace and the different type of justice, that justice can take so many forms. And one of it is a creative justice. Creative justice is to give the power to the parties, give them the parties' self-determination, and ask them, what are the values more important to you? What seems to be fair and just to you in this dispute or in the settlement of this dispute? This is something I've learned a lot with the fellowship, and I have learned that you cannot have peace without the feeling of fairness and justice within the hearts of the disputant, and this only the way to have strong settlement and having the peace between the parties and bringing back the harmony. I have learned a lot of techniques and tools and ideas on the idea of creative justice and the idea of getting people along and agreeing on the values that matter to them the most in order for them to reach a settlement that they found it is fair and just, which is ultimately bring back the harmony and the peace to the two parties and the greater community. I hope I answered your question, and in 1 minute or so. I hope so.
You did. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. And I love the idea of creative justice, particularly from someone who works as a judge in their own country, and the openness to different ways of resolving conflict. Thank you so much, Sharif. Now we hear from Paul Mushato, current Rotary Fellow and former president of the Nakivale Rotaract Club in Uganda, who is currently studying at the newest Rotary Peace Center at Makerere University in Uganda. Paul.
My name is Paul Mushago, a Peace Fellow for the first cohort of the first Rotary Peace Center in Africa, Makerere Rotary Peace Center at Makerere University. I'm studying a postgraduate program in peace building and conflict transformation, and I've been exposed to new networks for Peace Fellow alumni, and also I have learned how to solve conflicts at the community levels using different approaches. Upon completion of this program, I intend to create a community center that unites all refugees from different countries in my community and design a program that sensitizes refugees and host communities upon peace building, human rights, and refugee integration. I encourage you to apply for this golden opportunity. Each year, Rotary selects 130 peace and development leaders from all over the world to receive a fully funded academic fellowship.
Thank you, Paul and Sharif, and thanks to all of you for taking a moment to learn about the Rotary Peace Fellowships. Applications are being accepted now. Check out this opportunity at rotary.org.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Edward Wageni from HeForShe movement, an initiative by UN Women that seeks to bring men on board to promote gender equality in partnership with women, building on all the effort that has been made by women's movement. The reason of being here today is to call for action. We have got a long way to go, and I'm inviting all men and people of all genders to join me in making that possible. Thank you very much.
Like other human rights and social justice movements, gender equality requires action and allyship across all of society. HeForShe is a global platform that invites men and boys to strive for an equal world for all.
We want to end gender inequality.
Since its launch by Emma Watson, HeForShe has become a community of millions of activists, the subject of more than 3 billion conversations on social media per year, and working with world leaders, has developed solutions for some of gender equality's biggest challenges. This year has only accentuated gender, racial, and economic inequality. In this context, HeForShe is bringing together the most ambitious leaders from across government, the corporate world, and third sector to launch the HeForShe Alliance. Trailblazers in their field, these HeForShe champions will spearhead transformative change, demonstrating the value of allyship in accelerating progress on gender equality and achievement of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
Hi everyone, my name is Brian Rush and I'm the Charter President of the Rotary Club for Global Action. I'm joining you all today from District 5150 in the San Francisco Bay Area. You know, I often get invited to speak at events like this because I spent a big portion of my career working with several Nobel Peace Laureates, including having run foundations for Archbishop Desmond Tutu and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I've been so fortunate to also get to travel the world with Rotary, and I'm constantly impressed by the great diversity of cultures I encounter. This diversity reminds me of a philosophy I first learned from Archbishop Desmond Tutu, a philosophy called Ubuntu, which loosely translates to, I am because we are. My humanity is tied up. It is inextricably bound up in yours, and we can only be human together. We all recognize the four-way test as a compass for the things that we think, say, or do. But when looking at Rotary's areas of focus, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, can act as a guide map for action. I have found this concept of Ubuntu to be instrumental into my understanding of the SDGs. A key pillar of the SDGs is to leave no one behind. If we're going to eradicate poverty and create a sustainably developed world, we need to include all members of society. And this includes those of us who are often excluded because of our sexual orientation, our gender identity, gender expression, or sex characteristics. The SDGs are based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and in rights. Now, some of you might know, a few years ago, I helped to charter the Rotary Club of San Francisco Castro, Rotary's first LGBTQ+ cultured club. Many people asked, why do we need a club like this? The Castro Rotary Club stands as a model that Rotary can be a diverse and inclusive organization. It is women, the diversity of race, cultures, faiths, abilities, ages, and indeed acknowledging our LGBTQ+ brothers and sisters that is in fact exactly what keeps Rotary relevant today. Since Castro was chartered, 3 other LGBTQ+ cultured clubs have chartered, the most recent just last month in Sao Paulo. In 2016, I was invited by Mohammed bin Salman and UNESCO to speak at an event on how Saudi Arabia could move forward into the modern age. On stage, I stated that if the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was serious about becoming a modern country, it needed to start addressing the rights of women and girls, people with disabilities, and its LGBTQ+ citizens. When I stepped off stage, I noticed I had 87 new notices on Twitter. Reading through them, they were overwhelmingly positive, gratitude that someone had finally called for gay rights in the kingdom. UNESCO picked up on this buzz and tweeted out a photo of myself and my husband with Archbishop and Mrs. Tutu. Throughout that day, there continued to be a constant stream of notifications. Apparently, I'd tapped into something. That night, I flew to Frankfurt, and when I landed, again, my phone notifications were blowing up. But this time, it was different. There were hundreds and hundreds of calls for my death, including photos of me on stage, as well as personal photos that had been gleaned from my social media. I have to admit, the experience was a bit overwhelming. It was the first time I'd really experienced that level of vitriol just for being myself. But you know what else happened? I was inundated by messages from young people throughout the Middle East, people struggling with their sexuality and who live in areas where their lives could in fact be in danger if they were to come out. They thanked me for being an example of someone living my life authentically. Saudi Arabia is just one example, but the UN reports that it is currently illegal to be LGBTQ+ in at least 72 countries, and in 5 of those countries, people who are identified as such can be put to death. We regularly face harassment, hate speech, physical violence, and in many communities, LGBTQ+ citizens have a higher likelihood of homelessness, poverty, and poor health. Last year here in the United States, there were more transgender murders reported since we started keeping records, and 20% of the hate crimes reported to the FBI are based on sexual orientation or gender identity. So how do we incorporate the rights of LGBTQ+ people into our worker programs? SDG 10 focuses on reducing inequalities within and among countries, a key component of Rotary's area of focus, peace and conflict prevention. Target 10.2 states that by 2030, we will empower and promote the social, economic, and political inclusion of all, irrespective of age, sex, or other status. Now, there are entities that would seek to discriminate against LGBTQ+ citizens because they don't consider this other status to include them. But it is commonly interpreted that this does include our community. Rotary's focus on basic education and literacy is closely tied to SDG 4, which seeks to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. But the reality is, throughout the world, LGBTQ+ youth are often excluded from educational opportunities, and when they're granted, they face bullying and harassment that often forces them to give those opportunities up, thus further contributing to a cycle of poverty. SDG 1 calls for eradicating poverty in all of its forms, and it is closely tied to Rotary's focus on community and economic development. Because of discrimination and exclusion, globally, LGBTQ+ people are much more vulnerable to poverty than heterosexual people. Also tied to community economic development is SDG 8, which focuses on promoting inclusive economic growth, productive employment, and decent work for all. Yet fewer than half of the countries in the world offer any protections for LGBTQ+ individuals in the workplace, leaving much of our population exposed to both formal and informal measures of discrimination in the workplace. You know, not so long ago, I worked for an organization and I was warned that I shouldn't act too gay. Because if the people that we were working with found out, they would immediately end the program that we were working on. This was super awkward for me for a lot of reasons. First of all, never before had I ever been asked to be anything other than who I am. And to be honest, it didn't feel right. I've been publicly out since I was 19 years old and happily with my husband for 25 years. Now I'm being asked to hide all of that? And what exactly is too gay? The reality is, I don't act at all. I'm just myself, and part of that includes being gay. But am I too gay? At the time, I decided that the good that would come from this partnership was worth being circumspect in my behavior and language. And I was wrong. I moved on, and I can tell you that being asked to deny who I am was a major factor in that decision. I made a commitment then and there that I'm never, ever going to be anything other than myself. If that means I lose clients, so be it. I have been blessed in my life to be given an amazing platform, an opportunity to work with Nobel laureates and faith leaders, celebrities, political leaders, and even young people. And to be anything other than my authentic self not only does a disservice to me, but it does a disservice to all the LGBTQ plus people in the world who need a voice, who need us to stand fast in who we are. You see, an important way that culture evolves is through visibility. As Rotarians, we are passionate about peace. I imagine that's why most of us are participating in this event today. Peace can only be achieved when we reduce inequality and exclusion. We need to work together to value this beautiful diversity of the human experience so that all of us can achieve our own vision of peace and prosperity. I'm inspired by the future that we Rotarians can create together. But to arrive in this future, we need to remain authentic to ourselves, and all of us need to stand as allies to others who are being authentically themselves. I encourage all of you to break out of your comfort zones and talk to people who are different than you. Find some common ground and take action. Remember Ubuntu. My humanity is bound up. It is inextricably tied up in yours, and we can only be human together. Thank you.
Welcome to 4 fantastic women of action. Joining us from Ontario, Canada, Rotary International President nominee, Jennifer Jones, and Rotary International Director and incoming Rotary International Vice President, Valerie Wafer. As many of you know, Jennifer will be the first woman to lead Rotary International in about a year from now. We're also delighted to have joining us from Alaska, the first woman appointed to the Rotary Foundation Board of Trustees, Carolyn Jones, and from California, the woman who blazed a trail for all women in Rotary, first female president of a Rotary Club, Sylvia Whitlock. Their accomplishments are many and our time is short, so I'll refer you to the event website for their complete biographies. Director Valerie, I hope you and your fantastic panel hear the thunderous virtual applause. So let's get the conversation started. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, District Governor Mary. It is truly an honor to be here today to celebrate 75 years of Rotary and the United Nations. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has appealed to all governments and societies to build a world where no one has to be afraid because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. A top priority for Rotary is growing and diversifying our membership to make sure that we reflect the communities we serve and are inclusive to all cultures, experiences, and identities. In the journey of diversity, equity, and inclusion, Rotary International has stepped forward to raise awareness, visibility, and the voices of its dedicated members in the quest to include underrepresented groups in roles of leadership, those currently present, and those not present in our organization. So my first question, let's open this up. Can you share an example of how you have leaned in when others at the table may not have wanted you to speak up? Jennifer, let's start with you.
For as many steps forward as we've taken, there's still a lot that we need to do. And so from a personal perspective, yes, of course, there's been times. I think of times when I've been approached inappropriately, whether it's by comment or gesture. I think of working with others, not necessarily in our organization, but even in my vocational life, where I've been told to be different because the way I wasn't perhaps the way that was going to be the best way forward. And I think that it takes a lot of interpersonal strength to be able to say, no, I'm going to define who I am the way I am, and I'm going to be that way. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we're as authentic as possible as the example for others that follow us.
Thank you, Jennifer. You are a true example and one that I am proud to follow and call you my mentor. So thank you so much. Carolyn, Can you give us an example of how you leaned in when others at the table might not have wanted you to speak up?
There are many. It's hard to sort out, but my favorite and first probably had to do with the fact that my Rotary district was responsible for extending Rotary into Eastern Russia starting in the 1990s. This was at a time when Russia itself was in upheaval, leaving its communism politics to whatever was next. And Rotary saw an opportunity to bring new Rotarians into the fold. They sent out a notice to several different districts that were close to Russia. We're separated by the Pacific Ocean, but we were the only one who responded positively. And so it was in 1997, in May, 6 weeks before I was to become district governor, that I accompanied the then district governor to Siberia to charter 4 Rotary clubs. At the last club in Tomsk, my host asked me if I could take time out to come to their cancer hospital. Tomsk is next door to a town called Seversk, where there is a nuclear power plant, and there had been lots of leaks. And a lot of the children were showing up in the hospital with leukemia and other forms of cancers of the blood. While the doctors had a procedure for treating this, it had been a couple of years since they'd last received any of their dollar stipend from the federal government. So they didn't have the means to buy the medicine to treat these kids. And my host was hoping that if I went with him to the hospital, I would be moved to make something happen through Rotary. I did go. I met 5 children and their mothers who had moved into the hospital to take care of the kids. They thanked me for coming and thinking about them. I went back that night to the charter ceremony and told all the Rotarians what I'd seen. And what I learned was it wasn't just the children who had cancer who were in distress. All the children in Russia were distressed in the 90s because they were at the bottom of the list of how government money was going to be spent. And they were orphaned, they were abandoned, they were without education, they were homeless, they were without clothing, you name it, everything you can think of, these kids didn't have. I went back home, I told my district, and in 6 weeks we came up with what we called the Children of Russia Project. And we advertised it within the district and outside of the district to help children in Eastern Russia. And based on the suggestions from our 22 clubs in Eastern Russia, we were able to raise over $600,000 and finance 30 matching foundation grants to help kids in Eastern Russia. That was not definitely on my roadmap of what I'd do as a governor that year, but it's hard to say no. And I found out that Rotarians worldwide have a soft spot for children, and they stepped up.
Incredible effort. Thank you, Carolyn. Sylvia, you are the mighty mouse that roared. Tell us how you leaned in.
Well, that was a lean. That was a lean in. We leaned in because when we were invited to join Rotary way back in 1976, Rotary didn't take very kindly to that. Once they found out that there were women in the Rotary Club, they sent someone to take our charter away. And they said, you can no longer call yourself a Rotary Club. So we stopped calling ourselves a Rotary Club. We called ourselves the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte. And we continued to do Rotary things, except we didn't do any international projects because we didn't have Rotary's blessing. But we continued to do everything in the community that had made Rotary such a strong presence in that community, even though Rotary International disapproved of the fact that there were women. We couldn't understand why, with a motto like service above self, the idea of women doing service was not appealing to the Rotarians whose selves were saying, we don't want women in this Rotary Club. And they themselves prevailed really for 11 years while they took us to one court, to the Superior Court. When we lost the case in the Superior Court and we appealed to the Appellate Court, we won the case. They reversed the Superior Court. And, that's the year I was going to be president of our ex-Rotary Club. Remember, we're not Rotary anymore, we're ex-Rotary. So I became the president of the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte while Rotary International continued to fight. And of course, they took the case all the way to SCOTUS, to the United States Supreme Court. Well, the Supreme Court, in its wisdom and being really aware of the civil rights aspect of that action, ruled in favor of the Rotary Club of Duarte, and women became a presence in Rotary. But that was huge leaning in, and we had to have a sense of humor about it. Because if we had been serious and gone away because we were maybe a little bit disheartened by what was going on, well, probably there would not have been women in Rotary today. But we stayed there. We acted, although the bylaw said Rotarians had to be persons of integrity, and in the beginning it said men of integrity. So that was a huge lean in, and everything was a lean in for 11 years. It took 11 years of leaning. Can you believe that? If you had a child who was 10 years old when this started, by the time this was over, that child was 21. And weren't you concerned about the kind of world you were preparing for that child to grow up in? If that were a girl, what would she feel about the regard for women in her world? So we think we killed many, many birds with one stone when we lead in on the move to get women into Rotary. Okay.
Well, I thank each of you for leaning in and getting us to where we are today. Let's move on to the next question. How can your Rotary family apply the lessons you've learned to amplify the voices of the underrepresented groups in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals? Carolyn, let's start with you.
Okay, that's a big question.
It is.
And I would start by saying, Rotary family, don't leave it to serendipity for this to happen. If you want this to happen, in the words of past president and former president Frank Devlin, you have to be proactive. I think you need to begin by having an agenda and specifically state that your agenda includes diversity, equity, and inclusion. Next, identify the people that you want from the recognized groups in the community to be a part of implementing the agenda, whether it's teachers, religious leaders, shopkeepers, students. Give them a role in the planning, the speaking, and the action, and then invite them to the party. But once you get them there, make sure you get them on the dance floor as well.
Thank you, Carolyn. Sylvia, what are your thoughts?
You should ask me that question, because I worked for the United Nations for 8 years in the Secretariat. And and do they believe in DEI? Well, let's look around and see. One of the things that I learned, I probably knew it in the back of my head all along, was that we have an ERA, an Equal Rights Amendment for Women, that was first proposed way back in 1923. It's never been made an amendment to the Constitution. Why is that? Well, it expires and they breathe life into it again, and it expires and they breathe. And maybe that will happen again, because this year, we'll just talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. Besides gender equity, there are 16 other goals. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And I belong to a group called USA, United Nations Association in USA, and we work on advocating for all those goals, and among them, gender equity is a huge one. There are things, there are things in this world that women have a part of, that women know about, that men don't know about, that men may have a feeling about, but that women can deal with. A lot of issues around health, a lot of issues around sanitation, a lot of issues about the way women live. And so it's to our advantage to have women involved and women empowered. We don't have as many women in the political arena as we should. We have more than we did 10 years ago. And maybe we'll even get the ERA to move towards being an amendment one day soon. But We need them because their voices need to be heard. It's not just one voice. There are two voices that need to be heard. So I think it's important to have women here where they need to be.
Thank you. Jennifer, let's round out this question with you.
Well, I think that in order for us to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular the one that we're talking about with gender equity and gender balance, is that we have to be intentional. And that's a really big part, the intention to make a difference, that we have to call it out, we have to own it, and we have to put steps in place to create a landscape for change. And so I applaud, for example, our incoming president, Shekhar Mehta from India, who's made it a priority during his term as president to elevate the conversation about empowering women and girls. And, you know, to make sure that in doing so, putting that out as a priority, it's giving permission perhaps to some who might not have ever thought of this, to the leadership that he's looking to inspire, to each of us, to say that maybe there's a part of this conversation that we can have, that we need to play a role in and challenge our own inner dialogue, each of us. Being intentional is also establishing for us as an organization our DEI, or Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force for our organization, creating a DEI statement that talks about diversity, equity, and inclusion and what it means to us as an organization.
It's a very exciting journey that we're on. The conversation that we're hearing in our Rotary clubs and our districts is changing every single day and changing for the better around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So really happy and excited to be part of the journey, and excited to be part of an organization right now that is really has this front and center in their conversation. And we know that we're going to establish an organization that our children and our grandchildren, especially our daughters and our granddaughters, will want to be part of. And that's very exciting. The Rotary International Board in 2019 set a goal to have representation of 30% of women in Rotary and in leadership positions by the year 2023. The current global representation stands at 23%. Now, goals are important to show intent and leadership, but 2023 is only 2 years away. So how do we get there? Carolyn, you were the first woman on the Rotary Foundation board. What was that experience like, and how do we move forward? How do we get to 30%?
As to your main question, I don't mean to throw a curve to you and Jennifer, but I want to throw the answer back to both of you. Because in my time as being a Rotary leader, I've always believed you should lead by example. And I've tried never to ask any Rotarian to do something that I wasn't willing to do myself. So it's at the top level of Rotary that you've set this 30% goal. And I think that if you want to make this happen in such a short time, it's the directors and the trustees that have to truly buy into it, not merely as a vote, but what they're going to do. There are some countries where we have lots of women, my country, the United States. There are some countries where we have woefully few or none, but we have directors sometimes from some of those countries with the woefully few or none. So this is a challenge to them. What are you as directors going to truthfully do to go back to your constituency and say it's time to bring more women into Rotary? They should be inviting women to visit the clubs. They should be inviting women to be program speakers. They should be consulting with the women in their country about how they can get them to be interested in Rotary. And then you should look at the few women that are in these woefully few countries and ask them, how is it that they were invited? Why do they think that other women have not been invited? What took you so long to join Rotary? And I think if the top starts and leads, that then they can get the message out, and clubs and districts may be more willing to follow. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step.
So, I mean, Carolyn, challenge accepted. You're absolutely right. We need to lead by example. And I think it also takes some leadership on our part as well, because one of the things that we're doing as an RI board is we're looking at making the roles more doable so that we can attract younger leaders as well. But here's the really exciting thing. The future leaders of our organization have got it figured out. The Rotaractors already have globally 45% women representation. And in North America and the Caribbean, we're at 54% women representation in Rotaractors. So, you know, the Rotaractors are definitely going to hold us accountable, and so they should. And so I really do see that changing. And as Jennifer said, and you've also eloquently said, that, you know, the more we have women in leadership roles, the more people will step up and realize that this is available to them as well. And I think sometimes in the 116 years of our organization, there was the perception that it didn't matter how hard you work, which positions you had, perhaps you wouldn't be considered for some of these leadership positions. So again, I think it's a really great time. I'm going to roll on to our last. Oh, Sylvia, do you have something?
I just wanted to add something to that. When our club invited women into Rotary, and Rotary didn't like it, they took our charter away. Now the Rotary bylaws say that a club may not be chartered unless its membership is open to both men and women. And there are clubs who openly say they don't want women members. Now, what kind of strength is Rotary putting behind what they've said? That's another question to consider.
Mm-hmm.
If I could comment on that, because it's an interesting dynamic. There's and it's one that I've been digging into recently. And I don't want to do a deep dive on this, but it's a delicate balancing act on how to deal with this, because not only are there male-only clubs that are being chartered, but there are a lot of female-only clubs that are being chartered as well. And when I say that it's delicate, is that in some parts of our world, there are women formed clubs because they don't feel comfortable joining in a Rotary club that is comprised of all men for whatever reason. They don't feel safe, they don't feel respected, they don't feel that they're being taken seriously. So they are forming their own clubs too. And so how to deal with this is challenging.
It says it's open to both men and women. Doesn't say you have to have them when it's chartered. Just says it's open, so if they're available, that they're acceptable.
Yeah. Wonderful. So let's move on to our last question. Rotary's area of focus and the Sustainable Development Goals align and build positive peace by improving daily life for everyone, everywhere. You have all traveled the world on behalf of Rotary and seen the amazing work supported by our organization. What is your Rotary moment from these adventures? Sylvia, let's go to you.
You know, I've had so many Rotary moments, and I've really traveled the world. But I have to tell you, you know, I grew up at a time when polio was rampant. I had students in my high school who got polio. I was in New York City when swimming pools were closed because there was polio around and children couldn't go into the pools. So when I went on my first NIDS, my first campaign in India to give polio inoculations, for me, it was a huge feeling knowing that I was going to put some drops in some child's mouth that would prevent him from getting the spread disease and eventually wipe out the spread disease. But when I went to Delhi, I was with a group of women who had lists of the children in the neighborhood, and they were going and knocking at doors and giving inoculations. And we went to this house. It was a 2-story house, and the woman who answered the doorbell leaned over the balcony, and they told her what they wanted, and she came down and her child was inoculated. And she said, you know, I have a neighbor upstairs who had a baby, but just 3 weeks ago, he's probably not on the list. And they said, okay, call her. And she brought that baby down, and that baby was inoculated, and my heart just rose. I couldn't believe that. Here we are. We're doing everything we can to make sure we meet the needs of a country, a world that's hurting, being hurt by polio. So that was a big moment for me. I have many moments, but that one I keep remembering. I keep going back to that. I see the little baby coming doing it. That was my Rotary moment.
I think any of us who have experienced that, Sylvia, you just took us right back there. And I got some chills because I had an opportunity to give the first drops to a very young baby as well. And I'll never forget that moment. It was incredible. Carolyn, how about you? Would you like to share with us your Rotary moment from an adventure?
Yeah, one of many, yes, had to do with the fact that my Rotary district was responsible for extending Rotary into Eastern Russia, starting in the 1990s. This was at a time when Russia itself was in upheaval. At the last club in Tomsk, my host asked me if I could take time out to come to their cancer hospital. Tomsk is next door to a town called Seversk, where there is a nuclear power plant, and there had been lots of leaks, and a lot of the children were showing up in the hospital with leukemia and other forms of cancers of the blood. The whole project began because of meeting the children who had cancer. That was in '97. I was back in Eastern Russia in 2000 as a Rotary volunteer, and the hospital invited me to come for a visit. And I didn't know what was going to happen, but they had invited those children back. And they'd come in from the villages with their parents, and they said, "Carolyn, we don't have cancer anymore."
Oh.
I said I was a Rotary volunteer that year. I was at an orphanage, and I got to know those children really well. I returned there 4 more times. That was in the early 2000s. 3 years ago, I danced at the wedding of one of those children. So it's moments like that that makes me really happy to be a part of the Rotary family.
Oh, goodness. I'm so glad this is our last question because I'm going to be in tears very soon. It's incredible to hear these stories. Jennifer, what's your Rotary moment from a travel?
Like my fellow friends, there's so many of them. And in reflecting upon it, I selected one about being part of a small group of Rotary volunteers. And we were in Venezuela and there to perform, joining a medical team and who was there to perform cleft lip and cleft palate surgeries. And that a life could be altered in the course of 1 hour so profoundly. And in countries like that, you know, children who are born with a cleft lip or cleft palate are often thought to be they're ostracized and just discarded. And so this is such an incredible opportunity to see a life changed. And there was a little 11-month-old baby who came into our surgical suite, and the family, a young fisherman and his wife, had traveled literally 14 hours by foot, by bus, by car to get there. And the baby went into the operating room, and I was sitting with the mom and dad, and they spoke only Spanish, and I don't speak any Spanish. And so we just sat there as human beings together and just waiting on pins and needles for their baby to come out. And the surgeon came out afterward with the baby and said that everything had gone well and brought the baby out and put her into her mom's arms. And through a translator, she looked up at me and she said, "I've always thought that my baby was beautiful, but now the rest of the world can see what I see." And it was just such a beautiful moment. Again, all of us in tears, and that her little life just changed, and to be part of something like that, it was truly, it was a moment I'll never forget.
I don't think it's a coincidence that you each spoke about making an impact on the lives of children, because we know when we change a children's life or save a children's life, we're saving the family as well. And we're allowing them to grow up and be productive citizens and give everything that they've got. And thank you so much for sharing your stories with us today. I think that we actually have come to the end of our time. It has been a true honor to be with the three of you today, to celebrate the 75 years of Rotary in the United Nations, and to just have a conversation about empowering of women and how we can lean in and make a difference. So thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you each for your answers and your sharing of your personal stories. It was a true pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Bye-bye.
Wow, what amazing speakers and panelists. Let's all accept at least one of the calls to action that they've shared with us today. Before we say goodbye, I'd like to thank those who made today's event possible. The District 7230 program team, Jason Gonzalez, Wayne Charles, Frank Wilkinson, Suzanne Schwartz, Anna Foltz, and DGN Marty Schulman, our district membership chair. A very special thank you to our program consultant, IPDG Mahbub Ahmad, who connected us with Stefan Dujarric and Melissa Fleming. This 75 years of action, this celebration of 75 years of Rotary and the United Nations became truly global with the participation of the Rotary Representative Network and Rotary International's External Relations team. Thank you so much to them. It's been an honor and a privilege partnering with other districts who host significant United Nations operations. District 1990 in Geneva, District 2080 in Rome, and District 9212 in Nairobi and Addis Ababa. And finally, dear friends, thank you for spending part of your Saturday with us. We hope you enjoyed the programming and learned a lot about the shared values and vision of the United Nations and Rotary. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you want to check out the additional program content, if you want to see a replay of this live stream, if you want to share it with friends, colleagues, Rotarians, potential Rotarians, check out the District 7230 YouTube channel that's displayed on the Chiron below. So goodbye, dear friends. Have a day filled with joy, peace, and Rotary Fellowship. Until next time.
Take action.
With Rotary.
With Interact.
With Rotary.
With the Rotary Representative Network.
With Rotary.
Through international service.
With Rotary.
With Rotary.
With Interact.
Take action.
With Peace Fellows.
With Rotary.
As young leaders.
With Rotary.
With Rotaract.
As people of action.
Today.
Take action.
With the United Nations.
With the UN Environment Programme.
With Rotary.
And with UNICEF.
With the United Nations.
With the World Food Programme.
With UNESCO.
Take action with Rotary.
With the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa.
With UNICEF.
With the United Nations.
With Food and Agricultural Organization.
With the United Nations.
With UNESCO.
With Rotary. With UNICEF.
For gender equality and UN Women.
Today.
Take action.
With Rotary.
With Interact.
With Rotary.
With the Rotary Representative Network.
With Rotary.
Through international service.
With Rotary.
With Rotary.
With Interact.
Take action.
With Peace Fellows.
With Rotary.
As young leaders.
With Rotary.
With Rotaract.
As people of action.
Today.
Take action with Rotary today. Recording that thing. Oh gosh. Thank you for. I'm getting there.
My name is Wayne Charles II, and
I thought you were reading it. What happened?
I was supposed to say in addition. I said and. Oh my gosh.
All right, one more time. I'm getting there.
Today's celebratory event.
And Rotary External. Whoa! All right.
Today's celebratory event.
This is where it's going to be hard. One more time.
You're doing great. You're doing great. Stop talking about it.
All right. Zen. I like that one.
Good job.